Right, well, it's 6:30. Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Rushcliffe Borough Council Planning Committee, which, like all meetings at the moment, is being held remotely, with most participants being from home, and we're using the online technology. And as I'm sure colleagues and anyone watching us will understand, is sometimes we can have technical blips, but hopefully we will get through the meeting without too many technical issues. For the benefit of members of the public or anyone watching, my name's Councillor Richard Butler. I'm the chairman of the Planning Committee, and at the meeting tonight, as other councillors are Councillor Mrs Stockwood, who is the vice chairman of the committee, and then we have Councillors Clark, Goland, Healy, Major, Mason, Murray, Purdue-Horan, Thomas and Verdi. Council officers we have with us this evening are Mr Pegram, who is the service manager for communities, and we also have Mr Hilton and Mr Sharman, who are area planning officers, and those gentlemen will be talking us through the various applications we have tonight. And also with us is Mrs Sells, who is the borough solicitor. And we also have admin support from Mrs Coop with us tonight as well. So we go into what is going to be a very busy meeting this evening. You will have seen the agenda. We do have a lot of applications on, all of which are very important ones. Could I please remind colleagues that they are complex, important decisions to take. When we are debating, please try and remember to stay to material planning facts, and not. I know sometimes we'll sometimes can drift off into matters which may not be particularly relevant to planning matters. So I just need to remind us all of that, really. So if we go into the main agenda of the evening, so first of all, do we have any apologies for absence or substitute members, please?
No, there are no apologies this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have our full complement of regular members of the committee. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Does anyone have anything to declare under the Code of Conduct or under the Planning Code? No, I don't think there are. But if this evening, as ever with all meetings, if during the meeting anything is said and you suddenly think, oh, perhaps I should have declared an interest, then just make that known at the time. Right, so item 3 is minutes of the previous planning meeting, which was held on the 14th of January. Are we happy to accept the minutes as correct and accurate? I assume if anyone isn't, could you just indicate? No, I think we're all happy with those. So we treat the minutes as being correct from the 14th of January. Thank you. So just get my pieces of paper. So we now go into the main reason that we're here this evening, and that's planning applications that are to be discussed and decided this evening as on the agenda. And the first item tonight is land south and west of Groom's Cottage, Shelford Road, Radcliffe-on-Trent. Also, I'm aware that one of our members will have to stand down from this item, Councillor Clark, because he being one of the ward members for the area, but I know he will be speaking as a ward member shortly. So, Mr. Pegram, please, you're talking us through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, there are some late representations which were circulated yesterday to the members of the committee. No change to the recommendation other than under item 3, you will see that there are some changes to condition 1 and 2, which basically relate to changes in drawing numbers as a result of recent plans that were submitted. I'll just share my screen with you. So hopefully by now you should be able to see the screen. So
yes, it's on, it's clear, yeah.
First application then, as you say, is land south and west of Groom's Cottage, Shelford Road, Radcliffe-on-Trent. This is a site which has the benefit of outline planning permission. granted in September 2019 for residential development. It's the area outlined in red, as you see on the plan there, and on the aerial photograph there. So you have Groom's Cottage and Hunter Stables in here, and you then have Clumber Drive to the west and Shelford Road running generally north-northwest of the site. You'll probably be aware as well, members, that the rest of the area, including this parcel of land here, wrapping round, down and all the way down to the railway line, also has outline planning permission for up to 400 dwellings. The first phase of 103 have received reserve matters, and that work is under construction. And there's a later phase that you'll see in a moment in this area here, where we're considering an application at the present time. So just to take you through some photographs before we go into the plans, excuse me, this is looking at the frontage of the site. So this is the driveway down to Groom's Cottage and Hunter Stables. This is, as I say, the frontage of the site with the post and rail fence across the front. That's now looking across the frontage of the site. So that's the front boundary to the site with the properties fronting Shelford Road there. And then moving back, you can see the properties that then front onto Clumber Drive. Just moving across that frontage, looking again generally down the site, so you can see the properties on Clumber Drive. And then again, looking generally in a southerly direction, again, the driveway to the neighbouring properties that I pointed out. And then standing on the frontage, looking across the front of the site, down Shelford Road towards Radcliffe-on-Trent. And that's the first properties on Shelford Road you see there. Again, just moving along that frontage, looking across the front boundary hedge, down across the site. And then closer to those neighbouring properties. And then again, looking across the frontage, that's the driveway I pointed out to Hunter Stables and Groom's Cottage. And then you can pick up in the background there, looking more easterly, you can pick up the development on the neighbouring site, which is now underway. That's looking out of Radcliffe-on-Trent along Shelford Road. And then again, turning around, looking the other direction. And then just some shots along, this is the opposite side of Shelford Road to the application site. We move into the application site. This is the existing boundary treatment along the boundary with properties on Clumber Drive. So post and rail fence. There are some areas of hedgerow along that boundary as well. And then again, here you'll see post and rail fence, but with fencing behind. So as I say, there's not hedgerow all the way down that boundary at the present time. This is now looking along effectively the southern boundary. So this is the boundary which is shared with the neighbouring development. You can see the Harris fencing on that neighbouring site. So that's looking again, generally easterly. You can see the new houses in the distance. And then again, moving closer along that boundary, again, you can see the new development with Groom's Cottage and Hunter Stables over to the left. Again, looking at that relationship with that new development next door. This is the adjacent, the eastern boundary on the upper part of the site. So again, this is the driveway that serves Hunter Stables and Groom's Cottage. Photographers just within the application site here. So that's again just showing the details of the application site as you saw with the two properties next door, Groom's Cottage and Hunter Stables. And then if I move into the layout, Chairman, this is an application for seeks reserve matter. Oh, beg your pardon, I've gone and pressed the wrong button. It's a reserve matters application for 55 dwellings, predominantly semi-detached or terraced. So this does follow generally and broadly the master plan or the indicative plans that were submitted with the outline application. You have a central spine road coming in, running round the corner of the site with the properties arranged as you see around that area. There's a central area of open space here, and there would be an attenuation basin in this location with an underground pumping station in that location there. Just while I'm on this plan, Chairman, this site would not provide its own equipped play area. That's being provided on the neighbouring site, and we have negotiated footpath links through to that neighbouring site so that people here can go on and use the play equipment on that neighbouring site. Chairman, the application as originally approved in outline is subject to a Section 106 agreement, which in accordance with our policies requires 30% affordable housing. This scheme has come forward and the applicant is indicating that it will be 100% affordable housing, a mixture of shared equity, so intermediate housing, which is the green properties, and a social rent, which is the blue properties. I'll come on to the details of that in just a moment. The application is submitted with quite a detailed landscaping plan, and you'll see from this that there are proposals to retain the existing hedgerow along the southern boundary, plant a hedgerow along the western and part eastern boundary, and then plant additional trees along the access road and within the open space areas. There are actually no trees on this site at the moment, Chairman, so there would be obviously a significant gain in terms of tree planting. This is just providing a little bit of detail in terms of the garden areas, Chairman. All of the garden areas comply with the guidance within our residential design guide. You can see that for the most part, they're quite generous. These properties on the western boundary have gardens greater than 90 square metres all along that side. Some of the properties have a garden of about 110 square metres. There are some smaller gardens, but they still comply because those are 2-bedroom properties. The mix of properties, Chairman, on this development would be, bear with me, 22 bedroom dwellings, 25 3-bedroom dwellings and 10 4-bedroom dwellings. Just a bit more detail, Chairman, in terms of the layout of the properties there. In terms of the appearance, as I say, they're a mix of 2, 3 and 4-bedroom properties. These are the typical elevations. If I could come back just briefly to this plan, in this area, Chairman, the properties have been revised, the design of those properties have been changed, so they now have a hipped roof rather than a gable roof to assist in reducing any impact on the properties on Clumber Drive. So this is the typical elevations of the properties, just to run through those for you. And then the 4 plots in that bottom left-hand corner would have this hipped roof design. Chairman, this plan shows that relationship. It is an area which I'm sure will come up during the debate, but that shows plot 21, and you'll see the relationship with the property on Clumber Drive. That distance from the rear elevation here of that property to the boundary is around about 21.8 metres. So there is in excess of 22, 23 metres between those properties. And hopefully that section helps to provide some context in terms of the relationship between those two properties. As I say, the application does come with a detailed landscaping scheme. This is the details for the underground pumping station, which would be landscaped around the perimeter. And as I say, other trees planted. This just shows, Chairman, for reference with the neighbouring site. So this is the current application we're dealing with. And again, you can see there is a pedestrian link through to link the two developments for pedestrian use. Chairman, this is, as I say, it's a site with outline planning permission. So the principle of development has already been established. We are now looking at reserved matters for scale, appearance, layout and landscaping. Those details have been scrutinised by your officers and have been considered acceptable. There is the unusual twist with this one, it's 100% affordable housing. There is currently negotiations taking place on a deed of variation, which would refer to a minimum of 30%, but in policy terms, we can only insist on 30%. And there would be a change to the housing mix in the 106, so that it would refer to 55% intermediate housing and 45% social rent. Chairman, on that basis, I will set the application over to you with a recommendation to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram. That was very clear. Now, as is the way with the way the planning committee works, we have public or external speakers to speak to this application. We have 3 speakers for this application tonight, and the first one is Barry Herod, who is the applicant. So is Mr. Herod with us?
Good evening, Chair.
Oh yes, yeah, good evening to you. I'm not sure if you've been to one of these meetings before or if you've been advised, but you have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. It's not a two-way discussion. It's just literally you talking to us. If you're still speaking when 5 minutes comes up, we have to ask you to stop. So as soon as you're ready, the clock will start as soon as you're ready to start speaking.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. My name is Barry Herod. I'm a chartered town planner and senior planning manager at Countryside Properties, and speaking in support of the application. Having read the representations made by our neighbours and councillors, I think there are 2 main issues for debate this evening. Firstly, the suggested requirement for a landscaped buffer to the rear of properties on Clumber Drive, and secondly, the relationship of the proposed dwelling on plot 21 to properties on Clumber Drive. On the first point, the plans approved as part of the outline plan permission simply refer to a hedge along this western boundary. There is no mention of or a requirement for a buffer. Had it been the intention to require a buffer of any magnitude, then this would have been an explicit condition imposed on the outline plan permission. Instead, we have a condition that simply requires the reserve matters application to be generally in accordance with the design framework plan, which contains the following annotation to the western boundary. Quote, section of hedgerow to be planted to bolster this border and aid bat dispersal and compensate for loss of foraging areas, unquote. It is clear that the requirement is for a simple hedge along this boundary to provide an ecological and biodiversity benefit, not a buffer to provide or act as a visual or physical barrier. The proposed planting is nevertheless 2 metres wide and runs the whole length of the boundary to Clumber Drive. Submissions have been made to suggest that there should be a buffer some 5 metres in width, and comparisons have been made to the William Davis development to the south. That site has outline planning permission, and although a master plan was submitted suggesting a 5 metre wide buffer to the rear of homes on Clumber Drive, no detailed proposals have yet been submitted to this council for that site. Your officers make specific reference to this in their report at paragraph 49, which states the following. Each site must be dealt with on its own merits, and it is not considered necessary to require a 5 metre landscape buffer on this site to achieve a satisfactory relationship with neighbouring properties and protection of amenity. The boundary treatments are appropriate and follow that illustrated at outline stage and provide the necessary sensitive boundary treatment required to protect the amenity of existing neighbouring properties. It is my submission that the landscaping proposals provide a suitable and proportionate response to the requirements of the outline plan permission. The hedge and additional tree planting within the hedge line, which has been requested by your council's own landscape officer, will be retained by way of a covenant enforceable by our registered provider, and an appropriately worded planning condition could be imposed if considered necessary. I also want to confirm that the boundary treatment to the eastern boundary alongside the drive to the hunting stables includes a similar boundary hedge along its length, and that has been welcomed by the occupier of that property. On the second point, our neighbours have expressed concerns about the relationship of plot 21 and properties on Clumber Drive. The properties at 15, 17 and 19 have rear extensions which have reduced the original depth of their rear gardens. As your officers have confirmed, the distances from the rear of those properties to the boundary of the application site itself and the gable of the house on plot 21 are sufficient to minimise any overbearing impact. Moreover, there will be no loss of sunlight or any overlooking of the gardens of our neighbours. One point I also want to make is that, as you would have seen from the layout plan presented by your officer, the gable of the house to plot 21 is positioned such that it mainly sits within the gap between 15 and 17 Clumber Drive to reduce even further any perceived impact on outlook from the rear windows of those properties. Committee, in summary, the application seeks planning permission for 55 desperately needed new affordable homes in this area, and I urge you to endorse your officer's recommendation and approve this application this evening. Thank you for your time.
Right, thank you, Mr. Herod. That's within the 5 minutes, and that was very clear. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Andrea Lightbourne, who I think is with us, and Andrea is speaking in objection of the application. So, Ms. Lightbourne, well, I can see you're with us now. I can see you on the screen.
Hi there.
And as you will have heard, you have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. So as soon as you're ready, you can start addressing us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I live at 15 number Clumber Drive. So just to set the scene for everybody here, Mr. Pegram said earlier that the initial application is generally followed, that the current application has initially generally followed the initial application. If you look at the initial application, you'll notice that the properties that were at the back of Clumber Drive, 15, 17 and 19 were all back-to-back properties. So that has been completely changed. Mr. Pegram's also mentioned 21 metres. As indicated, we have got an extension to our property. I would say that I appreciate the revisions that have been made to the initial planning application. I like the fact there's a 6-foot fence, the double staggered hedgerow. However, I'm a little bit surprised that at one point there's 2.4 metres from the back of our fences to the end of a property. How can this be so if there's a 6-foot fence, a double staggered hedgerow and a garden pathway? I would also add that if I look out of the back of my kitchen window, 2/3 to 3/4 of my whole back fence, all of everything I will see out of my back window will be an 8.3 metre brick wall. That is all I will see. For the other 1/3 to 1/4 to 1/3 of my fence, I will have a driveway that's where I currently sit and eat dinner in the summer. And I will have a driveway there where people can walk right up to the back of my fence. The wall will be completely overbearing, despite the proposal of the hip roof. That's all I'm going to see from the kitchen window. Every other property along the length of Clumber Drive is going to have a 10-metre garden backing onto their property. It feels very much like a discrimination. If you were to live on Clumber Drive, if you have a look at that plan, you must admit that my property is absolutely the worst property to live at, and that you'd be very disappointed with this potential decision. That's probably all I've got to say, to be honest. Thank you, though, for listening.
No, that's fine. Don't worry. You don't have to take 5 minutes up. It's just a ruling we have that you have up to 5 minutes. But you came over very, very clearly, so thank you for that. And our third speaker on this item is one of the ward members, Councillor Clark. So, Councillor Clark, when you're ready, if you address us, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. Just to make very clear at the outset, we and I do not object to the principle of development at all. As Mr. Pegram said, it's already established. But as usual with these sorts of things, there's quite often some devils in the detail, which is what I'm referring to. Excuse me. The three main things, the driveway hedge, what I'm calling the buffer zone, and plot 21. In terms of the driveway hedge, I believe that has now been agreed, but my question, which I will float and leave in the air for the committee, is how will that be maintained? When I say maintained, I mean kept. In other words, can it disappear in a few years' time? Will there be a covenant established on that to ensure that that hedge arrangement is maintained? So turning to the main issue, and this is the break of land, what I'm calling a buffer. And I've always understood that with this revision that there was a 3 metre buffer proposed, and so I'm surprised to hear that that is not the case. And if that's not the case, then that strengthens and invigorates my objection to this application even more, because there needs to be a buffer commensurate with the William Davis buffer of 5 metres, and I thought that 3 metre buffer was quite reasonable to ensure that there is a break between this development and the rears of Clumber Drive. So the issue is more about the layout, and I don't know whether I could ask Mr. Pegram just to bring up the slide with the layout of the whole site on it, please. But in terms of what I'm calling the buffer, and it's the bottom corner, yep. So as Mr. Pegram's illustrating with his cursor, number 21, which is that very bottom left-hand house or property, to my mind, there should be that 3 metre buffer along the entire length of this boundary, which I understood was going to be protected by a hedge. And so my main question to the committee is, and to the officers, how is that buffer going to be enforced in the future, in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years time? Will we make sure that there are no sheds or any other structures or anything put into that buffer? And how do we ensure that that buffer doesn't become a rubbish tip of some sort or another? So is there going to be a covenant that will ensure the remainder of that buffer for in perpetuity, basically? So in terms of plot 21, as the Clumber Drive resident indicated, and it is shown, although you can't see it, but it is there on one of the detailed drawings. The bottom corner of that house comes to within 2.4 metres of the boundary hedge. So that breaches the nominal 3 metre buffer that I have been talking about. But even so, you just look at that layout, Mr. Chairman, and you can see that it looks incongruous. The rest of the estate has been laid out pretty well, but then you suddenly have this extra pair of houses, and certainly number 21, which is half of the pair, sticking out from the imaginary building line, if you like, and it encroaches right onto that boundary hedge. And I think that's incongruous, and I think that is overpowering. I do accept in condition 4, it does say that the window in the side gable of that house will be obscured and non-opening, which is fair enough. But I still maintain that that house shouldn't be there, or all the houses should be shimmied to one side, if you like, to create that additional 3 metre buffer. So those are my main concerns, Mr. Chairman, and I hope that those real concerns about the green buffer, in inverted commas, can really be taken into account, and especially the existence of that plot 21. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Well within the 5 minutes. So that was our final guest speaker on this item. So we heard from Mr. Herod, who is the applicant, who was telling us about their understanding of the landscaping buffer, which he feels wasn't part of the original outline planning application, but he told us what they were to do, and also acknowledged the other concern or main concerns being raised. We've also heard from Ms. Wadbone and Councillor Clark about plot number 21 and the impact on the residents on Clumber Drive. And the resident on Clumber Drive, she appreciates some of the revisions that have been made to the application, but she is still very concerned about the impact of Prop 21 in particular on her property and the view she will get. And she compared what her or the gap between her property and the proposed property will be compared to properties further up the road. And Councillor Clark confirmed that he doesn't object in principle to the development taking place, but he said devil's in the detail, and again picked up on the points of the buffer. Also wants clarification on if we do get such a buffer in place, how is it policed, how is it monitored for future years? So those are the main points. I think, Mr. Pegram, could you pick up on those, please, and then we'll go into committee discussion.
Yes, Chairman, I'll be as brief as I can. Chairman, just to pick up on one point that Mrs. Lightbound made, I referred to the development as being broadly in accordance with the original indicative plans. The outline, Chairman, was outline only with access to be considered, but the application was accompanied by some indicative plans that showed what the layout could be. That layout follows broadly what was shown, or this layout, sorry, follows broadly what was shown, i.e. the road running through the L with properties either side. I will explain the difference in that corner in just a moment. The other point, just to clarify in terms of the distance from that property, hopefully you can see my screen. Oh, no, not yet, you can't, bear with me. Hopefully you can now see my screen again. When I indicated that distance, I did refer to this position. So yes, it's acknowledged that some of the properties on Clumber Drive have single-story extensions to the rear, but I was indicating the distance from that position to the boundary. Whilst I've got the screen up, Chairman, I'll just cover this issue with plot 21. Previously, Chairman, on that indicative plan, these properties did carry on running through here with properties here. So effectively, that area has been flipped. So instead of the properties running down through to this point and then properties running across there, they stop at that point and then the properties run east-west. This property is a 2-bedroom property, Chairman, and the garden area to that property is 94 square metres. So it's in excess of our standards. I don't consider that there's an argument to say that the development is cramped or over-intensive. It satisfies the standards in terms of the spaces. Chairman, I have checked and double-checked the design and access statement and the planning statement that was submitted with the original application. There is no reference that I could find, Chairman, to a 3-metre buffer. There may have been reference to a green planting or a green buffer through here, but there was no mention of 3 metres. The proposal is to plant a double staggered hedge down along this boundary. My understanding is it starts about there and then comes down to roughly this point. There is additional hedge planting through here, but as you heard, this property is about 2.4 metres off the boundary. So there would be a narrower gap, if you like, through there. Councillor Clark has asked how that hedge would be retained. You heard Mr. Herod say it's not a planning control, but you did hear Mr. Herod say that there would be a covenant on the properties that they had to retain that hedgerow. Again, the gardens of those properties down that western boundary are 13 metres long. So again, they exceed our minimum guideline figure of 10 metres, and that hedgerow does sit within that 13-metre distance. As with normal landscaping conditions, Chairman, there would be a requirement, certainly if anything died, was removed, became diseased within 5 years, there would be a requirement to replant that with similar species to that originally planted. But again, Mr. Herod has given you an assurance that that would be retained through a covenant. I don't think there's any other issues, Chairman, other than to hand it back to you and open it up to debate. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Pegram. We'll go into debate now. I'm sure some of those issues will be discussed as we carry on now. So we've heard details of the application. We've all read the reports and seen the application online. I have a hand, electric hand. Councillor Thomas, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Are you now taking contributions from councillors?
Sorry, yes, we're now open for councillors to discuss and debate the application. Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Looking at paragraph 64 of the officer report, I note that there are no retirement apartments or bungalows being proposed, despite the neighbourhood plan requiring 25% of the houses to be these. We can't carry on ignoring our neighbourhood plans. We can't carry on ignoring our demographic in terms of the housing mix provided in these new estates. This application also contravenes Core Strategy Policy 8 Part 2, which states consideration should be given to the needs and demands of the elderly as part of the overall housing mix. I suggest that the application should be refused on these grounds alone and possibly other grounds. The long length of non-native hedging along the drive of the adjacent property will do very little for biodiversity, and I would like to see the type of hedging revisited. I note the comments about proximity to existing housing, and I appreciate that it is very distressing for existing residents. However, this scheme doesn't appear to be much worse in this regard than other schemes elsewhere. A condition limiting permitted development rights on the plots in question could possibly assist with this in the future. Experience of buffer strips in Eastleigh is that they cause issues. For example, brambles damaging fences and residents annexing the strips into their gardens, preventing access for maintenance. The costs as well as the logistics of maintenance need to be considered. Despite this being an all-affordable site, it's proposed that estate management charges will be met by residents as an additional charge. This is already causing misery elsewhere, even for higher income families in market homes. No doubt Mr. Pegram will advise that this isn't a matter for this planning application. I urge, though, that the council enters into discussion with the developers and eventual housing providers to avoid the situation whereby residents on this estate are subject to management charges, and I would like that to be minuted, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Yes, I've picked up those points. Well, Mr. Pegram will explain or confirm whether or not we can take into consideration the type of houses that are being proposed here. You make reference to retirement properties, bungalows, and so on. I think the answer is well, we have an application in front of us, and as to what it is at the moment, we can only decide what's in front of us. But we'll discuss that in a moment. And but then you're also saying that should permission be granted, you're looking for some conditions, in particular with regards to buffer strip management and care, and also you're worried about estate management charges. So, Mr. Pegram, do you want to come back on any of those, please?
Yes. You've got paragraph 64 in front of you in the agenda. I'll leave you to read that. In terms of the affordable housing mix and the type of properties being provided, the scheme has been subject to consultations with our strategic housing manager, and they are happy with what's being proposed. So I accept there is some tension between what's being proposed and what the neighbourhood plan requires. But on this occasion, Chairman, I don't believe there are grounds to refuse this application for those reasons. Councillor Thomas also asked for the fact that the issue with regard to management companies to be minuted. Chairman, as you know, our minutes from this meeting are generally a record of the decision and the conditions or reasons for refusal. Just to reassure members, though, the matter of open space management is already or has been considered by the scrutiny group. So it's already a matter which is being considered by this council, and those issues are being looked into. In terms of the management of the open spaces, Chairman, in general, the central open space and the attenuation basin and the green areas in front of the properties would be maintained by the management company. The difficulty with that western boundary, Chairman, is if we were to provide, or if the developer were to provide a 2, 3 or 4 metre wide strip outside the gardens of those properties, in my view, it would become worse, if anything. It would not be a meaningful area of open space. It would probably have grass cuttings and goodness knows what dumped in it. And I think the solution that the developer has come up with in this instance is an appropriate response to that issue in trying to provide some mitigation between the new and the old development. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram. Yes, paragraph 64, it does say the scheme is promoted as an affordable housing development, no open market housing, therefore direct compliance with such a condition is not achievable. So it is quite clear in there. It also does refer to the neighbourhood plan, and which is looking for a broad mix of properties. But yeah, that is quite clear, I think. Right, who was next on the list? Who else is coming in on this stage? It's all a bit quiet, isn't it? It's yeah, Councillor Golan, please.
I just really wanted to reiterate what Councillor Thomas said. Experience. So I think Councillor Clark said in his submission, you know, what will it be like in 30 years' time? And I recommend he goes to Abbey Ward, where we have a big estate where there's a lot of bits of land which are partly owned by the council, partly owned by the developer of this estate, and of course now it's chaos. So I think this is, you know, not a good solution to set up situations where we've got bits of patches of land that are supposedly going to be maintained by a developer with a maintenance charge. But I think my main concern is I just don't understand why this house in the corner is that way round. It does, as has been said, it doesn't look like it fits with the estate. I can't understand, is there a practical reason why it's been rotated through 90 degrees? It just seems, you know, unfair on the person in the last house and on the other road that they've got this set back onto them. Is there, I know we have to take it as it is, but it just seems an unnecessary change to the original plan or original outline.
Do we know the answer to that, Mr. Pegram, why it appears to have been turned? Was it to do with trying to mitigate impact on Clumber Drive, or?
Well, just to reiterate, Chairman, the outline did not include layout, so it's not a departure from the layout on the outline. The outline included indicative plans of what might be built.
Yeah.
The layout is actually, although it's flipped round the other way, it's similar, albeit those last 4 properties, instead of running north-south, run east-west. Chairman, I do not know, I can't tell you why the developer has chosen to change that. The only issue I would suggest is that if you did run those properties north-south, you could argue that there's potential for overlooking from those properties. But again, the distances would be such that that wouldn't be unacceptable. And again, the distance from the rear elevation, the rear elevation of the original buildings and the new dwellings is well in excess of what we would normally expect for that type of relationship.
Does that help, Councillor Golan? Does that clarify? Oh, I've lost you off on the screen. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not possible to say, is it? Okay, I mean, the trouble is, you look at this, and as you said, people have said, you know, there's plans with all these good intentions, and then we know what's happening in West Bridgford, where in 5 years' time somebody wants to put a big extension in the garden, and we're into a different sort of scenario then, where this is even closer. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's hopeless, really, I think.
No, it's not. No, it's not hopeless at all. We need to look at all these questions and queries. I know that with regards to the management of the open spaces, there is a recommendation being done in the council from a scrutiny group, because there's a lot of these developments happening around the borough, and both this sort of size and larger, and most of them are subject or intended to have these management companies in place, which is all very good, but it's very important that they're going to be effective. So I know that scrutiny is taking place with regards to that, or I believe that's the case. So if I'm wrong on that, I'm sure I'll be correct.
I mean, if we had the power to say that it should be owned by the council, I'd be really pleased, but I'm sure we haven't. There's no point saying.
That's for a separate debate, I think. Councillor Stockwood, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I too am concerned about that hedge. I very much welcome the fact that there's a hedge proposed, and it would be incorporated within the gardens of the houses. It's the trees and the hedges proposed are going to form an opportunity for small wildlife to habitate it, and we're trying to increase our green footprint, so to speak, and I think it would be a really, really good measure. However, I'm concerned about the upkeep of it. But if it's in people's houses, gardens under their curtilage, it would be good if we could have a condition which, I know it's difficult, but the hedge to be kept at a height between 1.5 and 2 metres, the same as 2 metres is how high an ordinary fence can be at the back of a house. And they say, with that sort of condition, strengthening the position of the hedge, I think it would be good, along with the covenant that's proposed, from the viewpoint of the council, keeping a watch on this sort of thing, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwood. So, well, the possibility of having some sort of condition for hedge height, is that practical? Is that sort of thing we can, or maintaining a hedge height? Are we able to do that?
Yeah, Chairman, I think the caution I would add is that obviously all conditions have to satisfy the tests in the MPPF and the MPPG. One of those tests is it has to be enforceable, and it would be, I think in this instance, it would be more difficult to enforce such a condition. Obviously, it's no point in just putting a condition on saying the hedgerow shall be retained, because is it retained at that height, or what height is it retained at? So you would have to specify in a condition what height it should be retained at. Obviously, again, I've no doubt if someone chopped it down below the 1.5 metres, we'd soon get a call that they'd breached the requirements of the condition. I'll leave it for members to consider, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pegram. Right, do any other members wish to speak on this, or would someone like to make a proposal? I don't see any hands going up at the moment. Councillor Mason. Sorry, I just missed you there.
All right,
I don't mind whether it really doesn't matter whether it's a real hand or a virtual hand.
Well, I was doing virtual hands a few meetings ago, and no, they didn't take any notice.
I know they don't always work. So anyway, Councillor.
So, well, actually, I can see some of the difficulties to this application, but I would say that on the whole, I think it's quite a good application. I think when I hear about management, I think back to other areas where there's been no management companies' proposals and what have you, and it has been absolute chaos with nobody knowing who's doing what and everything. So I'm all for any management of hedges and having all that under one umbrella. So I would like to propose supporting the recommendation. I'm just looking for the page that proposed by the officers. Wait a minute, I've nearly got it. I'm nearly there. On page 35, and support that recommendation, and along with all the other supporting and the approval and the landscaping layout and scale, and all the conditions that are following. So I would like to propose that recommendation. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Mason. And that's so basically as per the report and the conditions shown. Does anyone else wish to come in and possibly second that at this stage? Councillor Verdi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would second Councillor Mason's proposal. Looking at the application overall and the comments that have been made, I think the development does complement the neighbourhood plan. Noting Councillor Thomas's points regarding paragraph 64, I think it does provide much needed affordable housing in line with our neighbourhood development plan, and the issues around the hedgerow and the privacy issues of plot 21 and so on. Again, I think there were references to the fact that such schemes do compare very similar, that they're very similar to schemes throughout the borough, and I think the proposal of the hedgerow to mitigate some of that is clearly aimed at addressing that issue. The matter regarding maintenance of the hedge, I think the covenant is in place. Enforceability and long-term view of that, and whether that will be undertaken or not, is not known to anybody at this table today or the meeting. But I'm in favour of the proposal, and I would second Councillor Mason's proposal. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Right, thank you, Councillor Verdi. Okay, well, we've had the application discussed, and we've had the recommendation moved and seconded as per the report. I don't see any other people wishing to speak, so I think we better come to a decision on this, unless we've covered everything, I think. So right, Mrs. Sells, I think we'll better go to the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the recommendation as per the report, no further conditions to be added. Councillor Butler.
For.
Councillor Gowland.
For.
Councillor Healy.
For.
Councillor Major.
For.
Councillor Mason.
For.
Councillor Murray.
For.
Councillor Perdue-Horan.
For.
Councillor Stockwood.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
Against.
And Councillor Verdi.
For.
Thank you. That's 9 for, 1 against, so the motion carries.
Right, thank you, Mrs. Sells. Thank you, colleagues, and thank you to our guests who spoke to us. And I hope everyone does realise we look at all these points very carefully. So we'll move on to the next application, and Councillor Clark's back on the committee now, having had to step down from that item. And our next item this evening is land off Ramston Road, East Leek. And this is the erection of 51 dwellings with associated access, parking and landscaping. And as per the previous report, one of our members has to stand down for this item. Councillor Thomas will be standing down from the committee for this item because she is a ward member for the area, but she will be addressing us shortly. So, Mr. Pegram, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, there were late representations circulated on this application. You'll see under item 2, there is a suggestion or recommendation that we include an additional condition requiring the provision of electric vehicle charging points. Again, I will share my screen with you, Chairman. Hopefully it's now visible to you all.
It is, yes.
The application site is located north of Ramston Road. This plan is sadly a little bit out of date because, as members probably are aware, there is a sort of housing development in the area to the west of this site. The site is effectively on the southern edge of East Leek. and the area which I'm indicating now with the cursor, as it's in entirety, has outline planning permission and reserve matters permission for 235 dwellings. We are currently looking at these two areas which I'm indicating on the plan now for an additional 51 dwellings on that site, taking the total to 286. That's the aerial photography. Again, Chairman, apologies, it is out of date, as you will see from some of the photographs in a moment. This is looking westerly along Ramston Road. Access into the site, you can see that the previous scheme for 235 has now been commenced on site. Improvements are being made to the road, I can assure you, Chairman, as part of the requirement of the previous scheme. Then looking across more in a northwesterly direction, and again picking up the new houses which are currently under construction. Looking directly into the site through that access point, and then looking generally across the site in a northerly direction. That's now looking back out onto those properties which front onto Ramston Road. There is a landscape strip across the front of the site with a swale in it. Wrong way, the other way. So moving a little bit further into the site, Chairman, you can possibly just pick up in that position there, sort of an earth mound. I'm told, Chairman, that is actually the work which is taking place to construct the estate road around the site. So that's the soil that's been excavated as part of those works to construct the estate road. You can also see on the western edge there, that's the Persimmon development next door to this application site. And then looking more northeasterly, the other direction, and again further around, and you can see there's a horticultural business in the to the east of the site in that location. Looking down, these are actually taken from a more elevated position, so a little bit more helpful. Perhaps you can see the site slopes from south to north. Again, you can see that work where they're constructing the loop road around the site. And again, looking generally in a sort of a northeasterly direction across the development site. That's now looking more easterly, and again, you can see the horticultural business in the distance there. And again, this is just an attempt to the photo montage to try and show the full width of that site in one shot. And again, just a couple more shots, as you can see, work in progress, Chairman. So, Chairman, the application site that we are considering this evening is this area, as I say, outlined in red. It's these two areas here. The estate road has also been outlined in red back to the public highway, as is a requirement of the planning legislation. And this shows you the approved reserve matters layout for the 235 properties. There is also outline planning permission for a school in this location with some additional land in this area which would provide school fields. There's a footpath link runs through the site, north to south or south to north, and that would be maintained and improved through the centre of the site. This is the current proposal, so it's an additional 51 dwellings in this area here and here adjacent the attenuation basin, and again that's the location of the proposed school site. The overall development would have the main area of open space in the centre of the development, with an equipped area of play in this location, an additional open space across the top of the site there. That shows the distribution of the affordable housing units across the whole site, so they are fairly well distributed and pepper potted across the site. And just to give you a flavour of the house types, yeah, this is not all of them, but you'll be familiar, no doubt, with the David Wilson Homes brand, and these are the types of houses that are proposed. Again, it is a mix of housing types. Bear with me, Chairman, if I find the relevant section in my report. I did have it earlier, but again, it's a mix of 2 and 3 bedroom properties across the 51 dwellings. But again, just the house types. Apologies, that one's a little bit faint. but that gives you a flavour of the house types that are proposed, Chairman. Chairman, goes without saying that Eastleigh has taken its fair share of housing over the past several years. This is obviously an existing development site which has permission for residential development. It's now the overall site is allocated in the local plan based on the commitment that was granted as appeal for the 235 dwellings. Your officers are satisfied that clearly this does result in some loss of some open spaces or open areas on the site, but the overall provision of open space within this site does still exceed what would be required for the number of dwellings that would result, i.e. the 286. So although this is additional to what's been approved already, Chairman, it is an existing site, perhaps preferable to another greenfield site elsewhere in Eastleigh. And on that basis, Chairman, the application is before you with a recommendation to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have speakers on this item as well. We have 3 speakers for this, and the first one is Mr. White, Harry White, who is the applicant. So hello, Mr. White, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Not sure if you've been with us all evening, but just to let you know, you have. So yeah, you know, you have up to 5 minutes to talk to us, and then we carry on. So as soon as you're ready, you can start addressing the committee.
Mr. Chair, can I just check that you can hear me okay? Is that coming through?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm sure
Lovely.
everyone else, yeah, everyone's nodding.
Lovely. Through you, Mr. Chair, my name is Harry White. I'm a planner at David Wilson Homes, East Midlands, and an associate member of the Royal Town Planning Institute. Firstly, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to address committee in respect of this application. David Wilson Homes are proud to be one of the UK's largest house builders. At the heart of our company is a commitment to sustainable quality family housing. David Wilson Homes have worked extensively with the council's planning officers throughout the application to create a well-designed development with a recognisable sense of place that will sit well with the existing development. It is considered that the proposals substantially accord with local and national planning policy and successfully demonstrate good urban design. Notably, there are no technical objections to this application. We fully support the comments of the planning officer in recommending this application for approval subject to the agreed conditions and the Section 106 agreement, which I should add has been circulated in draft to the council and the county. David Wilson Homes acknowledge that there remains an extant objection from Eastleigh Parish Council. We do, however, appreciate the withdrawal of the objection from Councillor Carys Thomas, although we note Councillor Thomas's additional comments of the 8th of February. To that end, the planning officer's responses to items 1 through 6 have our full agreement and support, and I should add that is to include the electric vehicle charging condition that was suggested. With respect to the perceived overdevelopment, this application approach is born out of pre-application discussions with the Parish Council, which are appended to the planning statement, where it was agreed that the additional dwellings over 235 could be supported, provided they met the housing mix requirements of the neighbourhood plan. The Parish Council has since accepted the proposals are in accordance. When taken as a whole, the overall density of phases 1 being the original reserve matter and phases 2, this proposal, are approximately 35 dwellings per hectare, which is appropriate for a development in this location and in accordance with the principles of the National Planning Policy Framework in making efficient use of land. Importantly, the proposals do not seek to allocate new land for development, rather to maximise the existing allocation for which the principle of development has been established and by which no upper limit has been placed on housing numbers. With respect to green space, the proposal comprises white land, which is a residual land left over from the development of the 235 dwellings. Whilst no open space is specifically provided for this application site, by the council's own assessment, the provision of formal and informal open space for the collective site is in excess of the requirements. Nevertheless, this is a full application, and to provide the required amount of open space for 51 dwellings would create an unusable provision that does not meet minimum sizes for functional spaces. To that end, we have agreed a financial contribution to enhance the nearest play provision to the application site. Therefore, this application provides opportunity to enhance the already extensive open space provision. We have since acknowledged representations of the Parish Council with respect to the application of these funds and have agreed to the pragmatic approach suggested for the Section 106, which again is in draft. In summary, the proposals are considered to represent attractive, inclusive and well thought out sustainable development that is in accordance with the principles of national and local planning policy and complementary to the local character. The proposed housing mix is in accordance with the council's requirements and is considered highly inclusive, providing good opportunities for home ownership and a varied choice suitable for its location. We therefore respectfully request that members give favourable consideration to this application in accordance with the recommendation of the officers. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. White. That's very clear. Our next speaker is Liz Taylor, who is speaking in objection, and I believe Ms. Taylor is from the Eastleigh Parish Council. I'm not sure on that, but are you with us? Oh, you are there, Ms. Taylor. Yes,
yes, I am. Thank you.
Was I right there? Are you from the Parish Council?
I am.
You're right. I thought you were. I just wanted to be sure on that. So, yep, the floor is yours. So up to 5 minutes to talk to us.
Well, I'm Liz Taylor, and I'm actually chair of Eastleigh Parish Council Planning Committee. You will have already seen the Eastleigh Parish Council's request to use the Section 106 play contribution for the Gotham Road play area, should this application be approved. And I endorse this along with the requests for conditions from Councillor Thomas. I'm here tonight to urge you in the strongest possible terms to refuse this application. As you are aware, Eastleigh has endured an unprecedented volume of housing development over the last few years. Over 1,300 houses have been approved and are either in the process of being built or already built. Infrastructure improvements have not kept pace with the rapid expansion of the village, and a further addition at this time would be unacceptable. Eastleigh Parish Council ask you to refuse the application for 51 additional houses on Ramston Road site for the following reasons. The improvements to the health centre building have been under discussion since 2013, and as yet there is nothing concrete on the table. The building has been declared unfit for the purpose. Access to the site is inadequate for further housing and will add even more vehicles onto basically a country road. Ramston Road joins Loughborough Road at a dangerous junction and then joins the A6006 at another dangerous and busy junction. There is an assumption that people will use their cars to travel to work and school, as the development is too far out of the village to encourage walking. This will add even further congestion onto already busy roads through the village, and at peak times they will pass Brookside School, which has no pedestrian crossing. The original outline application stated a development of up to 235 houses, and building is already underway. Reserved matters approved has already been granted for these 235 houses. With this in mind, the application for the 51 additional houses should be considered as a separate application and not a modification, and therefore considered as infill on green space under policy 11 of the local plan part 2. Further development of this site would be contrary to the core strategy spatial strategy to locate development within or adjacent to the main areas of Nottingham, and thus contravenes policy 11A. The two parcels of land are 1.3 hectares in size, which with 51 planned houses would be 39 houses per hectare, which is a greater density than the remainder of the site and the adjacent site. Therefore out of character as well as inappropriate for the edge of the development. This land is also immediately next to the proposed school. Loss of the green space reduces the visual amenity of the already planned houses and that of the adjacent site. Severn Trent has acknowledged that there is a problem in Eastleigh with the sewage system, which no longer has the capacity to cope with the rapid expansion of the village. Any improvements will take many years to achieve. Eastleigh has experienced serious flooding in recent years, and sewage from the pumping station has mixed with floodwater in the village centre and the children's playground. The proposed houses will further add to this problem. So in summary, Eastleigh Parish Council urge you to refuse this application as follows. This is not a sustainable development because Eastleigh's infrastructure does not have the capacity to support further development. Contravention of Eastleigh Neighbourhood Plan Policy H1B and Policies 18 and 19 of the core strategy. Further development of this site would be contrary to the core strategy's spatial strategy to locate development within or adjacent to the main areas of Nottingham, and also contravenes policy 11A of the local plan part 2. The density of the site contravenes policy 10.2 and policy 11B of the local plan. Loss of green space contravenes policy 11C and 11F of the LPP2, and access arrangements are inadequate in contravention of policy 1.2. That's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And yes, that came over very clearly. So thank you. And our final public speaker on this one is Councillor Way, who is one of the ward members. So Councillor Way, you're here.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay, Chairman?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can't see you at the moment, but I can hear you. Oh, you're there. You've appeared. Yes.
Okay. Oh, wait, yes. Okay. Thank you, Chair. I ask you to refuse this application. The original outline application in 2016 was for up to 235 houses, not approximately or around, but up to. This application was refused by Rushcliffe Borough Council Planning Committee and subsequently allowed following an appeal. This decision, dated November 2017, states, I quote, "Planning permission is granted for up to 235 dwellings." This was when Rushcliffe Borough Council did not have a 5-year land supply. This is no longer the case. Building of these has already started. The developers chose to site these 235 houses onto part of a site rather than redesigning to use the whole site. The application before you is for a further 51 houses on 2 parcels of green space to the north of the current development. This is not presented as a variation to the original planning application, so should be considered as a completely separate application. Local Plan Part 1, 2.4, Spatial Vision, has 12 objectives. This development does not comply with at least 4 of them and potentially with another 2. This vision includes the objectives to ensure thriving and sustainable communities through sufficient health and social care provision, transport systems and educational facilities. Our public transport system is based on 1 bus service, which, while adequate during the day, is of little or no use to people who work shift patterns outside the normal 9 to 5 or at weekends. There's no public transport system connecting to other places of employment, such as East Midlands Airport and the businesses being developed there, Nottingham University's Sutton Bonington campus, or the potential employment opportunities at the power station as Ratcliffe-on-Soar is developed. There is no public transport connection to East Midlands Parkway station. The centre of Eastleigh already suffers from traffic congestion, particularly at peak times in the morning and evening and mid-afternoon at the end of the school day. Most traffic from the village travelling to points north has to negotiate the village centre. Section 3.6 of the Transport Assessment states that 3 surveys were carried out at local junctions. There is no indication that any surveys were done looking at the impact within the village. Using statistics about Rushcliffe failed to take into account the particular issues in Eastleigh. In fact, it mentions that 5% travel by train. The last passenger train through Eastleigh was in the 1960s. At present, our health centre building is in need of replacement, and although this has been discussed over several years, there's still no indication of when this will happen. The current schools are reaching or have reached their capacity, and the development of the new school proposed on this site is vital. The school needs to be ready to take children from this development when the houses are occupied. Section 124 of the officer report states, quote, "The County Council's request that the spine road through the residential development be completed and is available for construction traffic to build the school is not considered to be reasonable. The likely outcome of this would be that all of the houses would be completed before the school is even started, meaning that families could move into the housing a considerable time before the school is ready. It's essential that access to the build the school is provided at the earliest stage. The intensive building on the sites adjacent to the school will undoubtedly suffer from extra traffic and parking. Recently, Eastleigh, in common with many other areas, has been subjected to flooding. The difference in Eastleigh is that the sewerage system is under extreme strain and the floodwaters are contaminated with sewage. The flooding extends across the children's playing fields, and evidence of the contamination can be seen as the floodwaters recede. This is unsightly, unpleasant, and dangerous to health. The pumping station is inadequate, and the Brookside sewer overflows frequently. The 51 dwellings will be added to the same sewer. It's perfectly obvious that once again, house building is outpacing the provision of adequate infrastructure, contravening policies. The term quality of life appears 11 times in the core strategy and is integral to the mission of Rushcliffe Borough Council. I urge you to refuse this application on the grounds that the infrastructure is broken and more housing in Eastleigh is no longer sustainable and will lead to a lower quality of life for current and for future residents.
30 seconds.
Thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wayne. And we've just been told there you were speaking for 4 minutes and 30 seconds. So, so well,
I timed it.
been practicing. So, oh, pardon me. So we've heard from our speakers on this now. So we heard from Mr. White, who was is representing the developer, gave us the background to the application, and pointed out there were no technical objections in the report. But the applicant recognises the parish council's objections and also picks up on the suggestion from Councillor Thomas about a condition for electric vehicle charging points, and also confirmed about the play provision, in the fact that although there's no new play provision for these houses, they plan to enhance existing area play facilities. We also heard from Liz Taylor from the Eastleigh Parish Council, who is urging us to refuse the application because Eastleigh has had a high number of new houses already, worries about the health or the facilities, the health centre facilities or lack thereof, rodent issues and safety for pedestrians of all ages. She considers that this number of new houses should be considered as a separate new application as opposed to being part of an existing development site, and also is of the mind that it's contravening numerous policies in the core strategy and also in the local plan and the neighbourhood plan, sorry, and also referred to sewerage and flooding issues and considers it's not a sustainable application. And then we heard from Councillor Way, who also pointed those out as well, and is of the mind that the site was granted permission for up to 235 houses, which was refused initially but allowed on appeal. But this is now going up with it by an extra 51, and considers that the 5-year land supply, which was an argument before, doesn't apply now, and also more concerns about the infrastructure, such as public transport, and the traffic matters and sewerage and drainage matters, and also picked up on the point about the spine road to allow access to the school building or the building of the school. So those cover the main points. Mr. Pegram, could you pick up on those, please?
Yes, Chairman, as briefly as I can. In terms of the contribution for the play area, there is already an equipped area of play to be provided on this site in the central open space area. That is what's been approved so far is targeted at younger children. Your community development manager requires a scheme for equipment or activities for older children, and his preference or his requirement is that it is on this site. Obviously, conditions again have to satisfy the tests. They have to mitigate the impacts of development that is taking place, and clearly if there is a need for older children play in this area, then it's best placed on this site. Having said that, Chairman, the Section 106 is being discussed and negotiated at the moment, and we are looking to provide some flexibility to that Section 106 agreement, so that if the scheme cannot be delivered on site, either in its entirety or in part, then a financial contribution could be made for off-site provision. Chairman, in terms of the health issue, again, this is a full planning application. So this does attract Section 106 agreement and a SIL receipt. SIL does cover health. We note the concerns and we are sympathetic to the concerns about the capacity in the health centre. We have quite a considerable sum of money sat in accounts for improvements to the health centre, and clearly it's a matter where the CCG need to come to us with proposals so that we can release those funds to improve health in the area. Having said that, Chairman, again, this scheme will provide a contribution and is therefore mitigating its impacts. Reference was made to inadequacy of the access and the highway issues. Chairman, I think you know what's coming. You will see from your report that the Highway Authority do not object to this application. They did have some concerns initially, and there was a further transport statement submitted which took into account the cumulative impact of traffic in the area, including this development, and they resolved not to object. Similarly, Chairman, we consulted Severn Trent Water. They did not respond to the consultation. This is a separate application. As I say, Chairman, it is a full application for 51 dwellings, but it is on an existing development site. Yes, the density on these two parcels is quite high, but I would suggest that really you need to look at the overall picture for this site. It isn't part of the 235, no, it wasn't authorised by the outline permission, but as I say, it is the same developer, and I would suggest you need to look at it as part of the whole site. In terms of the access to the school site, Chairman, the section 106 for the outline permission, which included the school site, requires that the site is provided including access. So it's already addressed through the existing section 106 and does not need to be repeated by conditions of this planning permission. The other aspect, Chairman, reference was made to conflict with our local plan. Again, I would draw your attention to comments at paragraph 33, page 46. Our planning policy manager was consulted and does not object to this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram. Yes, I think that's covered those points, and I'm sure further points will come up in discussion and debate now. So who would like to start this off, please? Anyone got any questions or comments? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of, or is it 2 or 3 questions? I can't see. First of all, the open spaces, and I heard what Mr. Pegram said regarding that central space, and his sort of comment seemed to suggest that there's some ambiguity about the size of that space in terms of what can be achieved on it. I mean, I was trying to assess, is it big enough for a few children to go and kick a ball about, for instance, or some equivalent type of activity. So that's one question as to whether that open space is really sufficient. In terms, and sorry, the what is the I think the northwesterly set of the 51 houses. They are directly adjacent to the attenuation ponds, so presumably this originally was open space in the previous application. My question, and it's a bit disappointing or alarming to hear that there was no response from Severn Trent, because my question was going to be what's the relationship of the level of ground levels between the tops of these attenuation ponds and those houses immediately adjacent? Are these attenuation, I know the answer is of course always yes, of course they're adequate, but are they really adequate? If they overflow and if they can't cope with the water, what happens to the water? Does that immediately flood these close adjacent houses? And sorry, yeah, that's it. Oh, sorry, yes, sorry, health centre. Mr. Pegram did touch on that, and I read paragraph 25, and it talks about the Section 106 contributions actually not being there because it is covered by the SIL scheme. Without trying to get too detailed, but how is the SIL apportioned? Is there a percentage asked for health contributions, or does somebody assess a fixed figure that is then included amongst a whole load of other fixed figures? So I'm just concerned because there is genuine concern about the health centre at Eastleigh. It's absolutely desperate to be replaced, and obviously all these different contributions are mounting up into, I'm hoping, what's a substantial treasure chest that will pay for a replacement. But I just want assurance that, or how is this SIL contribution actually formulated to ensure it represents a commensurate portion for the amount of houses? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram. The flooding the health centre, the flooding the open spaces. A bit more confirmation and explanation on that, please, and also how is the SIL going to work for the health centre?
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, the matter of open space is dealt with in paragraph 98 of your report.
Yep.
The Community Development Manager advises that this scheme of the 51 houses would generate a need for 0.064 hectares of amenity space. A scheme of 286 dwellings would require 0.36 hectares. This proposal overall, if you take the wider site, is delivering 2.84 hectares. So the view of your Community Development Manager is that this is providing more than required by his calculations. In terms of the concern that Councillor Clark raised with regard to lack of response from Severn Trent, just to clarify, Severn Trent comment on foul sewage. The attenuation pond is to take surface water. We have consulted the local flood authority, and clearly we wanted reassurance ourselves that the attenuation basins had adequate capacity for the resultant 286 dwellings. And again, they were satisfied that the scheme is acceptable in that respect. In terms of how SIL works, Chairman, it is different from Section 106. SIL is collected on the basis of a roof tax for a certain amount of money for each dwelling, regardless of size. That goes into a big pot, which on our current infrastructure list will pay for healthcare, secondary education. Trying to remember the 4 items that are on there now, Chairman, but it does cover healthcare. It's not necessarily earmarked for Eastleigh. All development across the borough will pay into that, and we will then have to determine the priority of spending for that pot of money, both in terms of what it's spent on and what location. Hopefully that clarifies the point as to how SIL works, Chairman. Thank you.
And Councillor Clark, you want to come back? And then I've got Councillor Mason.
Briefly, Mr. Chairman, I'm not quite sure that exactly answers my question. I understand what Mr. Pegram has said, but from what he has said, in theory, 100% of a SIL payment for this site could actually be used for, let's say, transport, and nobody would ever know. Because if you are saying that the SIL money just goes into a central pot, who is checking that each site, as a SIL is charged, that a treasure chest, as I called it, is being built up for the provision of each of the different types of service, health, education, etc., etc.
Well, I'm sure we don't really want to go into a great long explanation as to how SIL works, but maybe just a clarification of how is it decided. I think that's what we're asking.
Yeah, I'm really just want to be sure that some of this contribution is actually helping to pay for a new health centre.
Yes, for the Eastleigh provision. Yes. Yeah. Can you just help with that, Mr. Groom?
Excuse me. I think the The SIL is a little bit more difficult than Section 106, but clearly we would seek to ensure that the money is spent in the area where the impacts occur. The mechanism for spending it is effectively, as I say, officers, and I believe there are councillors will be involved in the process of determining where SIL money is spent, certainly in case of West Bridgeford. And as I say, it may be, we know there is an acute issue in Eastleigh with the health centre. We already have quite substantial funds to assist with the delivery of a health centre in Eastleigh. And therefore, Chairman, it may be that when we get to the point, I say, we haven't got a lot of SIL money yet. We've only recently introduced it. We haven't collected a great deal. So there isn't a pot there at the moment. But when that pot is built up, we will then look at what the priority spending needs to be for the borough.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
Thank you. Time and time again, when we're looking at Eastleigh, as we all know, flooding is one of the main topics of conversation, including sewerage and everything else. Houses are being built consistently all the time in that area. This is just another development on. Could I ask Mr. Pegram, have Severn Trent and I'm sure they must have looked at the area as a whole? I know that from my own experience, what happens at Keyworth affects me in Tollerton. And has a proper report and serious work been done on Eastleigh and the surrounding areas, so that each time houses are built, are they adding to the problem? And as things change, because I know that something's changed around Tollerton over the last maybe 6 years, if not 12, but is it kept up? Are they re-looked at on a regular basis on what is happening in that area? Because yes, on the face of it, this will be fine, but it is adding to other things that are happening in the rest of Eastleigh, and levels of water, levels of sewerage, and we just keep getting these applications and saying yes, and Severn Trent haven't replied. What are they doing to look at, and I have to say also County Council doing, to look at the future for Eastleigh and for flooding? Thank you.
Well, there is a mention of, comments about flooding in paragraphs 115 onwards, and the Borough Council has been liaising with the local flood authority, the County Council, but no, there wasn't any response from Severn Trent. So, is there anything? Can we answer the general question about the cumulative impact and how it's going to be monitored and managed or considered?
Chairman, yes, I can provide a very quick response to that, hopefully. My understanding is that Severn Trent have been looking into the issues in Eastleigh as to what the issues are. I understand from those discussions that part of the problem is that there is adequate capacity at the treatment plant for sewage or water. Unfortunately, as sometimes happens over the years, a lot of surface water connections have been made to the combined system. So that means that effectively you're pushing you're pushing clean water through a treatment plant, which is nonsensical. What happens then is in times of heavy flood, yes, the treatment plant surcharges. So that is, as I understand it, is part of the problem with Eastleigh. In terms of Severn Trent's approach to this, we consult them on all of these large applications. They sometimes respond, they never object. They never ask for Section 106 contributions, and arguably questionable whether that would satisfy the SIL regulations anyway. their approach to development in the area, Chairman, is that clearly they will benefit from water rates and sewage rates from the houses that are built, and they will build into their capital programme improvements to the system as and when they are required. The other aspect is, Chairman, that anybody, developer included, has a legal right to connect into the system. So they cannot refuse, as I understand it, a connection. They have to go through a legal process to secure that connection. But as I understand it, Chairman, Severn Trent cannot refuse a connection to their system. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Mason, are you coming back on that?
Yes. So, in other words, we just keep building houses, or the developers do, and everybody just says, yes, that looks fine. And the problem gets worse, accelerates, and where does that stop? And where does it stop? It's just, all I can see is that after all the applications and all the houses, and you've got sewerage coming up. Luckily with my flooding, I don't get that. It's pure surface water. But it's not coming from the fields nearby. So what you do in one area affects somewhere else down the line. And I just find it very difficult to comprehend how Severn Trent can just say, not reply and not do anything when there are such serious concerns. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Yes. Then.
Chairman, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Pegram. Yes.
Sorry, Chairman. Just one more piece of the picture I forgot to paint. I talked about part of the issue being surface water getting into the combined system. With these major developments, we consult the lead local flood authority. There will be surface water runoff from this site in any event. Even if it wasn't developed, there would be surface water runoff. What the lead local flood authority require is the developer to demonstrate that the surface water runoff rates from this site will not be any worse than greenfield runoff rates. And what they actually ask for is a thing called QBAR, which is greenfield runoff rates with a degree of betterment to take into account climate change. So the attenuation basin on this site would effectively hold water in storm events and then release it to the system at greenfield rate or better to alleviate any impact on the systems. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram. Okay, I've got Councillor Goland and then Councillor Stockwood. Councillor Goland, please.
I'm already unmuted. Thanks very much. So I have to say, obviously, I don't live in Eastleigh. Given that the estate already exists, I have to say I think these are good houses to build here. They're relatively small and hopefully affordable, reasonably affordable. It's making good use of what is effectively a brownfield site. I understand it's Whitefield. I have two questions. I'm pretty sure I've read somewhere in the last hour or so that there's electric charging points on this site. Can you confirm that? And also, I can't quite work out on the map the brown paths. Are these footpaths? Is there a cycleway through the back northwest corner of this site to the town? Because it's very close, I think, to the neighbouring road.
Right. Well, the answer to your first question about the electric charging points is yes, it's not in the report, but it was a late representation,
okay, yeah,
and it's been agreed that conditions will be put in to require electric points.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you did. You're quite right. You did see that correctly. What about the link, Mr. Pegram? The cycle, is it? Do we know if it's a cycle?
Chairman, there is a footpath that runs straight through the middle of the site, north-south or south-north, whichever way you want to look at it. That carries on beyond the site in the northerly direction. In addition to that, there was a requirement placed on the neighbouring development, possibly even the 235 scheme, to link footpaths and cyclepaths into the neighbouring development, Persimmon. So there are footpath and cyclepath links as part of the overall development.
So the answer is yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Stockwood, please.
There you are. Sorry, I forgot to unmute.
That's okay.
Yes, I've just one question really. on other sites, we have had a condition that when a certain number of houses are built, that's when, are occupied, that's when the school must start. Is there such a thing on, overall on any of the schemes that have been built in this area, please?
Chairman, the triggers tend to relate more to the provision of the land and the payment of the sum of money. Clearly, the actual delivery of the school is not necessarily within the gift or control of the developer. That's for the local educational authority to ensure. My understanding is that discussions have already started to take place for the provision of a school on this site.
Thank you.
Is that okay, Councillor Stockwood?
Yes, thank you. And with that, I am prepared to recommend this application.
All right, okay. So as per the recommendation plus the reference to the electric charging points.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Right, well, does anyone else wish to speak, or does anyone wish to second that recommendation? Councillor Major, you're waving.
Sorry, I can't seem to find the raise hand button for some reason. It's not on my system. Yeah, so I just had a quick point on aircraft noise. That was something that I think Councillor Thomas referenced.
Yeah.
And I think I would agree with her that I think that area is particularly sensitive to East Midlands Airport. And if there has already been a precedent of a similar condition in a similar site nearby, I would suggest that we should include that here, unless Mr. Pegram has a particular reason why that's not possible. But if that is possible to add as a further condition, then I would be happy to second the recommendation.
Right, I'm sorry, just making a note of that. Yes, the aircraft noise. There is paragraph 118 talks about the aircraft noise and concerns, doesn't it?
Chairman, can I draw a member's attention to the late representation schedule?
Yes, I know I've seen
deal with the issue of aircraft noise, and we provide an explanation as to why a condition would not be appropriate in this. Just in case members haven't read those late representations.
Sorry.
I've spoken myself with the building control officers. The condition that Councillor Thomas was recommending required a certain standard to be achieved. Building control officer has confirmed for me that they would expect that standard to be achieved, and when they're determining whether it can be achieved, they will take into account location of the site and external noises. So the condition is superfluous. The guidance is that we shouldn't put conditions on planning permission that duplicate other regulations.
And I do remember now, it was in the late representations. I knew I'd seen.
Sorry, I missed that. Yeah.
Couldn't quite remember, but is that okay then, Councillor Major?
Yes, that's fine. Yeah, I'm happy to second.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we've had the recommendation moved and seconded. I don't think anyone else wants to come in. I think we've covered the points that were raised, all very understandable points. Mrs. Sells, I think, shall we go to a decision, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is the recommendation as per the report, plus the electric vehicle charging points. Alphabetically, as always, Councillor Butler.
4.
Councillor Clark.
4.
Councillor Gowland.
4.
Councillor Healy.
4.
Councillor Major.
4.
Councillor Mason.
4.
Councillor Murray.
4.
Councillor Perdue-Horan.
4.
Councillor Stockwood.
4.
And Councillor Verdi.
4.
Thank you. That's 10-4, so the motion carries.
Right, thank you very much, and thank you again to our guests who spoke to us. So we move on now. As Mr. Pegram in effect has the stage, so to speak, and we've also got other officers who will be speaking on other applications. The Gresham Park application was the final one that Mr. Pegram was going to speak on tonight. So with your forbearance, can we bring forward the Gresham Park item? to discuss that now, and then we can go back to the agenda as per the agenda. It's simply for logistics and all the rest of it. So if we're happy to do that, we'll move on to Gresham Park, and this is the Borough Council application for the new 3G weather pitch. So, Mr. Pegram, as you're there, it seems sensible to keep it there.
Thank you, Chairman. You called me out.
I'm assuming you're okay with that.
Yeah, well, as long as the committee are, I'm happy to finish off and present. I will hang around, obviously, for my colleagues, but
oh, indeed, yes, yeah.
I don't intend to depart. Okay, yes, Chairman, I will. In that case, I'll proceed with this one. The Chairman, the application. Sorry, first of all, there were some late representations circulated, comments from the effectively the Rights of Way Authority. No objection raised by them. The application, as you say, Chairman, it is an application submitted by or on behalf of the Borough Council. It's council-owned land, and it's, as you will be aware, it's an existing area of sport and recreation. So there is at the end of the road, you have the Gresham School on one side, you have playing pitches in this area, and then you have car park, pavilion, and sports pitches in this area. There is an existing all-weather pitch in that location there, and the proposal is to improve that pitch and add a further all-weather pitch with floodlighting. If I take you through the presentation, Chairman, again, as you can see, it's in an area where there are lots of existing playing pitches. There are also floodlights on neighbouring Gresham site. That's the Gresham School. This is the Beckett School, and the area which is council-owned sports pitches is in the middle there between the two, effectively. So that's looking up the road towards the Gresham School. You come to the top where the roundabout is, turn left, and you go into the Gresham Park site. That's just looking across the car park at the existing the pitch. Part of the improvements here, Chairman, are to raise the height of the fencing. You can see that's the area behind the goalposts, and then there's a lower section around the site. Proposal is to raise that fencing to the same height and to resurface that pitch and generally improve it. That's looking across at the neighbouring sports pitches on the Gresham School site, and you can see there are some existing floodlights around those pitches. That's looking back across the Gresham site, and again across the Gresham playing fields. That's the area next door to the area that we're considering tonight, but still the council-owned sports pitches. And that's looking up the footpath between the Gresham School on one side and Gresham Park on the other side. And then again, just looking from that footpath across, you can see the existing all-weather pitch with floodlighting. Standing on that, you're now looking back the other way on that footpath, so the Gresham is on the right here. And again, just further along the path, looking to the north, and you'll see, you'll probably be aware there is, sorry, I was looking west, there is the tram lines run adjacent the top end of the site. That's looking into the site where the footpath runs in to the existing all-weather pitch and the pavilion. And you'll see, Chairman, this is the existing football pitches, which do suffer from a little bit of surface water flooding. The scheme does include improving the drainage to those pitches so that they are more usable, if you'd like to call it that. This is at the western end of the site, so this is the tram tracks and the Gresham Park to the left. And again, looking now in a sort of a easterly direction towards the existing 3G pitch with the pavilion to the rear. And again, just some other shots. You can see standing water from the recent rain. So, Chairman, this is the application site we're looking at this evening, the area which is outlined in red. The proposal is for improvements to the existing all-weather pitch and a new all-weather pitch. That would be enclosed by fencing around about 4.5 metres high. And that's the layout. So that's the existing all-weather pitch, and that's the proposed all-weather pitch alongside. There would be 8 floodlighting columns, 15 metres high, 4 on one side of the pitch and 4 on the other side. Again, just showing you that relationship between the existing all-weather pitch and the new. And then just the details of the fencing, Chairman. This is the spectator fencing that would be just inside the main all-weather pitch to separate spectators from the playing pitch, and weld mesh type fencing around the outside to a height of just under 4.5 metres. Those are the details of the lighting columns, 15 metres high with luminaires at the top. You'll note that these are shielded and downward facing to limit any pollution. And this plan is a Lux plan, which shows you the levels of light spillage from the site. And you'll see that when you get to this sort of position, the light spillage is very low, in fact, and the light is more concentrated onto the playing surface. In terms of those drainage works, Chairman, this is the grass pitches that are to be retained and improved. Proposal is to put lateral drainage under the ground across the site to feed into a central drain, then running through and into an existing drainage system. So that work would hopefully then ensure that the pitches are more usable and deals with that standing water that you saw in the photographs. Chairman, the site is within a flood zone. However, it is an existing sports facility and it's a water compatible use. The proposal should hopefully help to improve some of the drainage on the site. The all-weather pitch would ensure, in fact, it provides a better pitch for playing more often on. So it actually, although effectively you're replacing an existing grass pitch with an all-weather pitch, that will have better longevity and greater usage than a grass pitch. So, Chairman, given the location of the site within an existing playing area, there are no properties which are directly impacted by the floodlighting. The application is before you with a recommendation to grant planning permission. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Now we don't have any speakers on this item, but as you will have read in your report, the 2 ward members have no objection to the application, and as has been explained, it's more of a procedural matter that because it's a borough council application, it has to come before committee. So we can open it up now for a discussion, debate, and decision, or if someone wants to move it, or Councillor Major, please.
Yeah, I'm very happy to move this. I think it's a perfectly sensible, reasonable application, not impacting on anyone directly, and I think it would be really good. I do have a child who plays football out there occasionally, and often his games get rained off because it's too wet down there. And you also did confuse me a bit, Mr. Pegram, because Gresham School doesn't exist. I'm not sure what you were referring to, but either the Beckett or the manual.
I must admit, I was wondering that. I didn't like to interrupt.
So I'm very happy to put the motion forward to accept the.
You're proposing the recommendation.
I'll second it, Chairman.
And Councillor Clark is seconding. No one else needs to say anything. Well, no, I don't think anyone's speaking. Are we all happy? So, Mrs. Sells, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just reading through motion as per the recommendation. Councillor Butler.
4.
Councillor Clark.
4.
Councillor Goland.
4.
Councillor Healy.
4.
Councillor Major.
4.
Councillor Mason.
4.
Councillor Murray.
4.
Councillor Perdue-Horan.
4.
Councillor Stockwood.
4.
Councillor Thomas.
4.
And Councillor Verdi.
4.
Thank you. That's 11-4, so the motion carries.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Right, it's coming up to 8:25. We've been sitting here for 2 hours. And we've still got quite a lot to discuss tonight, but would it be opportune to have a little short comfort break? Are we all happy? 5 minutes? So it's 8:25 now. Shall we aim to get it's 8:23 now. Shall we aim to be back for 8:30? If that's all right with everyone. So we'll see you in a few moments. Thank you. Are we all on?
Hi.
Oh, we're back.
Well, no, it keeps saying my host has disabled it. Let me just try again.
Is that Debbie?
Yes.
Well,
And it's still saying you cannot start your video because the host has disabled it. There we go.
Sorry, Councillor Mason. I turned your video off when we went to the break because everyone else had turned theirs off apart from you. So.
Well, I had turned it off actually because I was. But okay.
Oh, you're there. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
you're on.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thank goodness it's not just me. That's a problem with the computer. Right. Thank you for your forbearance, sir. I think we needed the break. I suspect that all round Rushcliffe, the electricity consumption went up as everyone put the kettles on, as we do. And being totally selfish for a moment, I also had to get up and switch the boiler on because the boiler had gone off. So it's gradually getting colder and colder on a night like this. Anyway, I digress. So we'll get back to the agenda now. So the next application is Ruddington. This is Kempson Court, Kempson Street, Ruddington, demolition of existing commercial units and replacement with 4 new dwellings, including resurfacing to the street. And Mr. Hilton is going to talk us through this one, please.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So just to advise members, there have been no late representations for this application. Just going to share my screen. Okay, so the application seeks planning permission for the demolition of commercial buildings and the erection of 4 dwellings comprising 2 pairs of semi-detached properties. So the application site comprises a single-storey commercial building running along, situated at the end of Kempson Street in Ruddington. Kempson Street is a private road. The commercial site is a broadly L-shaped building running along the southern and eastern boundaries of the site. There's also a small separate commercial building at the front, comprising of a total of 5 units. So the application site includes this commercial site and also Kempson Street. And it seeks planning permission for demolition of these buildings, erection of dwellings, but also resurfacing of part of Kempson Street to the front of the site. So the site falls, the main site falls outside of the conservation area, although Kempson Street itself is within the Ruddington conservation area. Wait a second. So there are residential properties opposite fronting onto Kirk Lane. There's a property immediately to the east at number 12 Kirk Lane, property to the south at 37 Main Street. There's also the garden of number 31 Main Street, which butts part of the site. And then there is a commercial property, Orchard House, to the west of the site. I'm just going to run through a few photos. So this is a view up Kempson Street from the high streets, looking towards the main site. The cream-coloured buildings at the ends there are the commercial buildings in question. Another view across the front of the site, so you can see the buildings and then the area which is to be resurfaced. And a view across the application site. And then this is the small commercial building at the front and the adjacent property at Orchard House, which currently has consent for a beauty salon across the 2 floors. And then it's the view across the site looking across the rear of the neighbour at Orchard House. And then again, this is across what is currently the car park of Orchard House. And then this is a view across just the end of the gardens, number 31 Main Street. And here we've got a view looking out of the application site towards the terrace properties opposite, fronting Kirk Lane. And then you can just see in the corner here, the neighbouring property to the east. And this is a view of the bungalow to the rear of the application site. You can just make out the existing commercial building. This property has a small rear garden and a conservatory that's almost adjacent to the building, which is on the boundary. And then these 3D views just give a better impression of how the site sits with the surroundings. So you can see the neighbouring bungalow, Kirk Lane up here. Again, that's just another view of the site. So moving on to the proposed development, like I say, it comprises 2 pairs of 7 detached properties, encompassing a total of 4 2-bed dwellings. This plan's quite faint, but each property would have, properties 1 to 3 here would have an undercroft parking space. Property 4 would have a parking space to the front, so each dwelling is served with 1 parking space. I'll draw your attention to this first floor level where you've got angled front windows to avoid the sort of direct overlooking of the opposite properties on Kirk Lane. And this is a view of a cross section of the existing commercial building. And then this is the elevation views of the proposed dwellings. Wait a second. So in terms of impacts on the neighbouring properties, I just want to draw your attention to, you've got number 37 High Street, where currently there is the commercial building on the boundary. If I just jump to this picture here, you can see it forms quite a high boundary wall, which overshadows this garden. The application seeks a 1.7 metre high boundary fence, and obviously the dwellings would be set back from the boundary. So although they would be higher structures, given the setback, there would be potentially lesser overshadowing of the immediate garden space of this bungalow. Looking at the properties opposite on Kirk Lane, just trying to get back to the site plan here. The separation distance between the proposed dwellings and these neighbours is approximately 24 metres. Some of these properties opposite have got, if I just jump to the photo. Sorry about this. Okay, so you can see this is a view of the properties in Kirk Lane. Some of them have got 2-storey rear projections, which bring development closer, but still the distance between these projections and the proposed dwellings will be about 20 metres at the closest points. Given the angled windows that are proposed at first floor level, it's not considered that there's going to be a significant direct overlooking of these properties. So looking at the view from the conservation area, so the resurfacing works would be within the conservation area itself, but it's not considered that those works would have any impact on the character and appearance of the area. The site is tucked away to the side of Kempson Street, and from the public realm of high streets, it's considered there'll be limited visibility from the public realm. In terms of scale, the proposed dwellings would be similar in height to this building that you can see on the left-hand side here. In terms of parking provision, like I say, there will be 1 space per dwelling. On the immediate street scene of Kempson Street, it is a private road. There are various restrictions that have been implemented by the residents on there, but that it is a private road. In terms of the wider highway impacts, there are restrictions on the high street in terms of WL lines, and The site is also in a central location close to shops, services, public transport. So it's in a location where you'd expect a lower demand for parking. In terms of, it is an employment site at present, but the submitted design and access statement by the applicant sets out that it isn't currently currently viable. They are making a loss on the site. It isn't an allocated employment site when we're considering the loss of that for housing. So if we just move to this again to the site plan, when looking at the intensity of development, the properties would have fairly modest rear gardens. However, they are all two-bed properties. Within this central location, it is quite a high sort of built-up area. It's not considered that the sort of overall built form would be particularly at odds with the surrounding pattern development. I just want to jump against the cross-section plan of the site. When we're looking at the bungalow at number 37, I want to draw attention to the lower land level of the application site. It's approximately 900 mil lower than this neighbour, which does lessen somewhat the impact in terms of any overbearing of the proposed dwellings. You see here that the plan has a 25-degree vertical line of sight drawn on to demonstrate the potential impact on the windows of this neighbouring property. So given the setback, it's not considered there'll be a significant overbearing impact on that neighbour. Again, with the neighbour on at number 12 Kirk Lane, dwellings would be pulled off the boundary, whereas currently there is the commercial building which runs along most of its length. The proposed dwellings are about half the depth of the current commercial building. So for the reasons set out before you and in the report, the application is in front of you for a recommendation for approval subject to conditions.
Right, thank you, Mr. Hilton. We have one speaker on this application, and this is the applicant, Mr. Kent, Barnaby Kent. So if are you with us?
I am here, yes. Thank you.
You are. Hello there. Good evening. I don't know if you've been with us all evening. If you have,
I have. Thoroughly enjoying it.
Patience. So as you will have seen, you have up to 5 minutes to talk to the committee. And if you're still speaking, 5 minutes is up, or in 4 minutes and 30 seconds, we tell you you've got 30 seconds left. So as soon as you're ready, you can talk to us. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity to speak this evening. Hopefully I'll only take a couple of minutes of your time. I live and run businesses in Rullington. I'm not a faceless developer. The continued evolution of the village is really important to me. And I believe this can be demonstrated by some of the previous projects that I've done in Rullington, such as the purchase of the Bricklayers Arms public house, which is now the successful Frame Breakers pub. We have followed all the recommended routes in developing a plan for this site that we believe was relevant to the village. That included pre-planning consultation. The current property at 4 Kempson, which is often called Kempson Court, is not fit for purpose and does require a complete overhaul. It's fundamentally an old mechanics garage that is many decades old. And the appearance of the site, we believe, will be improved with this development, with the inclusion of gardens providing opportunities for the enhancing site ecology in comparison to the current concrete yard. The first application which we submitted resulted in some objections by Rullington residents, and as a result that application was withdrawn and amended to allow for these concerns. This included the reduction of the density to its current 4 times 2 bedroom properties and from a terrace to 2 sets of semi-detached. The new design is also reduced in height, and finally angled windows to the front elevation improve privacy whilst maintaining a degree of natural surveillance. The application has precedent from, we believe, from several successful developments with very similar submissions, one of those less than 150 metres from this one. The application, we don't believe, is of a density any greater than the houses it faces. But the ones in this submission are noticeably smaller in size than those existing across the road. Each house design supports the concept of home working, being of a general size and including a separate study. This encourages people living there to conduct their day-to-day working lives within the community, something which we believe is really important. All the business operations that were based on that site prior to this submission, it is now an empty site, have successfully relocated, keeping within the village if that was their plan. Finally, there were concerns raised on the parking, but this application will undoubtedly lead to considerably less traffic on Kempson Street itself than of the current uses of the site. This has to be seen as a positive in our view. Quite simply, that concludes the points I just wanted to make, which we think are relevant to this submission. And thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you very much. Very clear. As I say, we have no other speakers on this, but you will have seen in the report that one ward member is objecting to it and another ward member is supporting the application. Although Mr. Hilton said there'd been no late representations, I think colleagues probably received an email from Councillor Dickman with his comments, representations. So really, I think we can go what we heard from Mr. Kent, just giving us a bit of background to the application and his personal background and the reasons that the application is with us. So unless Mr. Hilton wants to make any points in there, do you want to come back on any of those, Mr. Hilton? Or
I think I just wanted to reiterate that the site has a commercial use and therefore generates a certain amount of traffic and parking demand. And clearly this, to an extent, would counteract that. So arguably there wouldn't be a greater pressure on local parking, although it is limited in the area anyway by parking restrictions.
okay, so would anyone like to, Councillor Murray, please?
Yes. Will there be electric charging points for the houses?
I believe there will be. I'm sure I saw it in condition.
Paragraph 13.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
So the answer is yes.
Right, okay.
Councillor Goland?
Just noticing that it's 90 centimetres lower than the surrounding properties, I think, or at least one of the surrounding properties. Is there any risk of flooding? Or are the houses lifted, actually, now I think that's it?
Do we have any thoughts about that, Mr. Hilton, on the potential flooding?
So,
is there any risk?
I mean, it's only the property at the rear which is at a higher level. I think the existing building kind of acts almost as part of that boundary. But in terms of flood risk, you will note that it is a hard surface site pretty much throughout. It's a concrete yard. No known surface water flooding issues in that immediate vicinity. And you could argue that it is a betterment by providing gardens and therefore, reducing that runoff.
That's okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right. Who's next? Councillor Mason.
Thank you. I would like to just move the recommendation on page 81. Is that? Yeah. I'd like to just move the recommendation on there and also on all the conditions as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mason. And do you have a seconder for that proposal, please? Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair. I have been waving erratically.
Have you? I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
I'm more than happy to second Councillor Mason on that, but just 2 points of clarification, if I could. The cul-de-sac says it's a private shared road. Perhaps that could be clarified. And from looking down Kempston Street, I'm assuming we're looking at the rear of buildings rather than access to properties. Other than that, I think the properties themselves and proposal are very, very good. I like the idea of the undercroft parking, and clearly that certainly I would think would eliminate some of the problems that people have been experiencing up to now. I mean, it's very, very contained. All looks very good. But perhaps clarification just on whether it is a shared road or not.
Okay, thank you. Can we clarify that, please, Mr. Hilton?
So I understand it is a shared private road, so it's shared ownership between the properties that are on that road, some of which have on-street parking and some of which have driveways or parking elsewhere, so there is a mix. For example, the property at Orchard House, commercial property there, has a car park to the rear, so it is a mix of the two.
Okay,
thank
is
you.
that helpful?
Thank you very much. Yes,
thank you. Councillor, two hands up here. Councillor Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got some unease about this application, in that I do feel that it's quite an intensive application. There's not much amenity space for the new houses, and there is some impact on neighbours, I think, just due to the kind of intensity of the development. So I do have some concerns. And I'm not convinced that the parking provision is sufficient, one parking space per house. But I've got a question really, and a suggestion if this does go towards approval. If it does go towards approval, I would suggest or ask if it's possible to have a condition that would remove permitted development rights, because in particular, I think the property that hasn't got a loft extension could very easily do that, which would intensify the development even more. And I think also windows could be problematic. Added windows anywhere could be problematic. So given the intensity, I would ask if it's possible to have a condition on permitted development rights. And the second question is about contamination. Given the nature of the site, are there appropriate conditions on contamination? Thank you.
Right, yes, because you're worried because it used to be a garage, workshop and so on, and maybe fuel, diesel or whatever. Is that's the assumption? Yeah, okay. What's the procedure regarding development or removing permitted development rights? Is that something we can do?
It is something that could be considered by way of condition if we felt it was appropriate to do so.
Right. So the councillor Mason, you moved the recommendation. Would you consider adding a condition along those lines?
Well, I no, not particularly, because I think it would be dealt with at the time when
on a separate application
when they happened. But I'd like to hear Mr. Pegram's view.
Yes, Mr. Pegram's indicating.
Chairman, just to cover a couple of points. Condition 5 deals with contamination on the site. We have also recommended conditions 10, which take away permission for enlargement or alteration, and condition 11 takes away permission for outbuildings. Yeah. Chairman, I noticed in fact that Unit 4 does have quite a large roof to it. And bearing in mind the history of the site and the previous concerns about the development, which included 3-bedroom dwellings, I don't think it's necessarily an unreasonable condition to put on to prevent that roof. So we've already taken away a lot of permitted development from this development. That's the one bit that's probably not covered because it wouldn't be classified as an enlargement or alteration. So that's my views, Chairman.
Right, that's helpful. Councillor Mason, what do you think to that? Is that okay?
Yes, yes, I'm happy with that. I was just a bit uncomfortable in the beginning because we would, look at it later. But yes, okay, I agree with Mr. Pegram.
Right, thank you, Mr. Pegram, for that guidance. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of minor points. Really, one's touching on similar things to Councillor Thomas. I was just want to inquire obviously there's one parking place for each property. I'm assuming, is there any provision for any visitor parking, even if it was only one visitor parking space, or is it just a question of sort of abandoning a car in front of one of the houses? And the other point, again, it relates to the electric charging points, and I have to confess, if this is in all the conditions on charging points, then I confess I've missed it. But I noticed condition 13 on page 84, and halfway down the paragraph it says, thereafter, unless it has been demonstrated that the provisional electric charging points is not technically feasible. Well, it used to be a garage. There must be a decent electricity supply there in some shape or form. And surely we are trying to get to the stage where electric charging points are pretty much standard. So, you know, normal services in houses, like we wouldn't say toilets have to be provided unless it can be demonstrated it's not technically feasible, which is a bit bizarre. So just like some explanation on that phrase about it not being technically feasible, because I think basically there should be electric charging points. End of.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Hilton.
Okay, if I start with the point about electric charging points, then, I mean, in terms of technically feasible, there may be situations where, for example, you wouldn't want charging cables running across a pavement. So if you had a dwelling that was in that sort of situation where there wasn't this undercroft parking or parking adjacent to the dwelling, then that wouldn't necessarily be technically feasible. Appreciate in this case, there isn't an obvious reason why that wouldn't be the case.
So that's the sort of reason. It's the trailing cables. It's not so much the capacity of the electricity supply, but it's the physical where the points go and such like.
In some situations, that may present an issue, I guess, when looking at housing layouts. Yes.
So it's just to cover all those possibilities, Councillor Clark.
Yes.
Okay.
Clarify on
thank
parking.
You. And sorry, what was that? The what about the parking? I'm sorry.
Yes. So the plans don't show visitor parking. There is just one allocated space per dwelling, and obviously, with being a private road, there isn't any, provision for additional parking. However, we are guided by the Highways Authority, and they are satisfied with the provision that has been put forward, given the central location.
Thank you. So that's your answer, Councillor Clark.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just actually a general comment as well. There's comments made about it being over-intensive and small. Well, in actual fact, because it is sort of intensive, it does fit in with the rest of the street scene, because they're all small, very small houses and very nice, very small properties. So I think it is in keeping.
Good, thank you. Okay, right. Oh, Councillor Thomas. I'll let you come back.
Yes, thank you. I just got one other question, really. In terms of the loss of the employment site, Policy 15 of Local Plan Part 2 seems to imply that change of use away from employment has to be justified. Could you explain how that justification has been arrived at in this case, please?
Well, I think the applicant explained that the existing businesses there have relocated and it's still within Ruddington. I think I heard him say that, but maybe I'm wrong. Would anyone like to?
I think it has to prove that it's not viable to continue in existing use, and I haven't read anything that says that. It might be there somewhere, but I haven't read anything that really explains why it's not viable to continue employment use there.
But yeah, but if the businesses are still in existence, they're still employing people, aren't they?
Mr. Chairman, yes, you're absolutely right. The people who are operating there have relocated within Ruddington itself. So as a result of this application, people have not been made unemployed. So the business is not where they are. They're still within Rodisham itself, as far as I know.
About change of use, though, if the buildings could be used for employment, continue to be used for employment, does it not have to be justified that then the change of use is away from employment to residential?
Well, can you just clarify that, please, Mr. Hilton or Mr. Pegram?
Okay, so I mean, one point is the building was originally built as a car repair workshop, from what I understand, and it doesn't serve the intended purpose for what it was built for. It's been since subdivided and then found not to be viable. It is, I mean, the issue of viability is set out in the design access statement, so I don't think there's any further supporting information, but clearly the applicant is making a loss on the current site, which is an indicator that it's not serving its purpose.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right. Unless there's anyone else wanted to come in on this, I think Mrs. Sells will go to a decision on this one, please. If you're all happy to do so. Yes, I think so. Yeah, Mrs. Sells, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is the report recommendation as per the report, plus that additional removing the permitted development rights for loft conversions.
Yes.
Councillor Butler?
For.
Councillor Clark?
For.
Councillor Gowland?
For.
Councillor Healy?
For.
Councillor Major?
For.
Councillor Mason?
For.
Councillor Murray?
For.
Councillor Perdue-Horan?
For.
Councillor Stockwood?
For.
Councillor Thomas?
Abstain.
Sorry, could you say that again?
I'm abstaining.
Abstain. Thank you. And Councillor Birdie?
For.
Thank you. So that's 10 for and 1 abstention. So the motion carries.
Okay, thank you. So permission is granted. Just a point about abstaining. I mean, generally speaking, on a committee like this, you're either for or against something. It's not. We're a quasi-judicial committee here. So if you're in a court of law, you're making a decision on something, you would be abstaining. But it's just an observation. Right, we'll move on to our next application, which is Neaton Road, East Bridgeford. And Mr. Sharman, I think you're going to lead us on this one, please. I'm sorry you've had a long wait.
Thank you very much, Chair.
There's lots of items on the agenda tonight. So anyway, over to you.
Yes, okay. Good evening, everyone. Let me just try and share my screen. Right, hopefully you can all see that. Okie doke. So this is an application for a single dwelling with a detached garage, and the dwelling is proposed to incorporate renewable technologies as well as sustainable building systems. Right. So the application site itself situates within the open countryside, about 750 metres northwest of the settlement of East Bridgeford. You can just about see the edge of East Bridgeford to the south of the plan in front of you. The site is accessed down Old Hill Lane, which is a private track, which is accessed off Neaton Road, which is here on the plan. The proposed site for the dwelling is over here. The land outlined in blue is also land within the ownership of the applicant, and this will be explained later in the presentation. So just a couple of matters of kind of setting the scene for this application. So this site is considered to be within the open countryside, and the NPPF identifies that within the open countryside we should avoid isolated new homes, save for in a few special circumstances. One of those under 79E is that the design is of exceptional quality, in that 2 items. First being, it is truly outstanding or innovative, reflecting the highest standards in architecture and would help to raise the standards of design more generally in a rural area. And 2, would significantly enhance its immediate setting and be sensitive to the defining characteristics of the area. It's also important to identify that this site lies within the designated green belt, So under paragraph 145 of the NPPF, there is a closed list for development that may be not inappropriate. Residential development is not on that list. So in effect, as per paragraph 143, inappropriate development is harmful by definition to the greenbelt and should not be approved save for in very special circumstances. And it's important to clarify that under paragraph 144, substantial weight must be given to any harm to the greenbelt, and very special circumstances will not exist unless potential harm by reason of inappropriateness and any other resulting harm is clearly outweighed. The scheme before you is put forward on the basis that it both meets and exceeds the requirements of paragraph 79E, and that forms part of an argument for very special circumstances. For members' comfort, planning inspectors have previously found that meeting the requirements of 79E can also represent very special circumstances. So just to start taking you around the site. So this is at the site access from Old Hill Lane onto Neaton Road. This is looking southwest, which is down towards East Bridgeford itself. And that is the view looking northeast as the road continues on, finally ending up at Neaton. This is the view to the northwest, looking up the access track. The access track also is a designated bridleway, bridleway 15. So this is just continuing up the length of the access track. And at this point, we reach the brow of the hill, and you can start to look down over the Trent Basin. To the right-hand side here, you can see another public bridleway, bridleway 16, which heads off. So this is a view from a similar location just to the southwest along another public footpath, footpath 11. You can see the application site now just to the centre of the photo. It's this clearing that's bordered by the trees and the transition from the agricultural land. Again, just heading back down the access track now, and again, you can see the site in front of you. Again, getting closer to the site, you've got some equestrian buildings on the left-hand side here, and the application site on the right. And stood on the entrance into the application site, which would remain as it is at the moment. And this is just a view across the northern corner of the application site. You can see the existing boundary hedges that have grown over time, as well as a number of specimen mature trees, and the fact that the site is a transitional area. The site has been used as an informal parking area over its time. There is no definitive planning history for it, but it's established as an informal parking area. This is looking towards the other side of the site, down towards the southern and southeastern elements. You'll see that there is a sharp drop-off on site topography, and the access track that we've come along also carries on down the hill to a fisherman's car park, which I'll show you later on. This is a view looking northwest towards the River Trent. You'll see here at the bottom, there's a public footpath again. This is public footpath 13, which crosses directly on the application site. It's another view just from a few steps back. So this is going down the access which goes towards the fisherman's car park. You can see this just at the bottom of this aspect. And a closer view towards that fisherman's parking area. So this is footpath 13, where it crosses the access to the fisherman's access track. And this is heading southwest. And if you climb those stairs, look towards the application site, you can see the decline that you just climbed up, and you can see the application site to the right-hand side of that photo on that raised plateau. And again, back from the access track, footpath 13, where we saw from the top of the application site itself, you look down upon it, that's it from the bottom. And if you carry on along there to the northeast, you can then look back at the application site from the field boundary where the footpath runs. And again, you can see the well-established field boundary, the hedgerows, the existing trees, and the site's informal use. This is just an image from the, looking back up towards the site. Again, you can see the steep topography, and we're just looking back towards where the proposed dwelling would be. Now just to take you through the application drawings, that is just a site topographic survey just to illustrate the nature of the site on the plateau with the escarpment and then the River Trent further to the left-hand side. Again, that's just another red line plan. So just showing the access from Neaton Road all the way back through to the application site for the dwelling. This is a clearer layout plan for the proposed site. So the access as it is as existing. You've got the existing trees and boundary treatments, which are all largely to be retained. You've got the detached garage, which is going to be included within a landscaped bund. So as it's seen from outside the site, it would appear as a landscaped feature rather than any detached ancillary structure. You'll also see proposed new hedgerows. You can see where the existing right-of-way is footpath 13 that we walked upon earlier in these site images. And you can see that to the south of the dwelling here, there is a proposed ancillary access, which is the access to the basement, which is where the plant room is for the property. Again, just a roof plan for the dwelling. You can see that they're proposing to use a green roof and also to integrate photovoltaic panels. I will touch upon the integrated environmental strategy in a little bit more detail once we've gone through the plans. So just running through the floor plans, you've got the first floor of the building there, which is largely bedroom accommodation. Going through to the ground floor, which is accessed at grade as the front of the dwelling and encompasses an internal courtyard area with views out towards the River Trent. And there you can see the basement plan with the plant room access to this point here. So these are the elevational treatments that have been proposed. So the building is proposed to be clad in a Corten steel, which is a rusty coloured steel effectively, and the dwelling would have organic effect tracery elements cut out from that to fit in with the character and appearance of the wooded area in which it sits. You can see in this view here the nature and appearance of the proposed garage. The garage there with the landscaped bund behind it, not appearing necessarily as a built feature from outside the site. And you can also see from the front of the site, the building is already slightly set down from this element. This is a view where you can see the access track down to the fishing ground, the fisherman's car park. So this is the access from that for the plant room. And you can see that the basement level here, which it sticks up from on this side, which would be finished in a natural stone. And as part of the design strategy, that is to give the building the appearance that it sits upon a rocky escarpment in its location. That same material is proposed for any retaining boundary features, as well as the garage structure as well. Again, another view as if you were in the fisherman's car park looking towards the open side of the cylindrical development. So you can see into the courtyard from this particular view. And these were some 3D CGIs actually to illustrate how it would appear through the seasons in terms of its cladding material and how that would feature within the different seasons and still blend in with the landscape. Here's just a further detailed drawing of how the Corten cladding works. As I say, tracery cutout sat on the outside, and then any glazing elements sat in behind that. A mixture of actual natural glazing, glazing that is obscured, as well as glazing with laser etching in it. Here is a wider landscape view of the scheme, just showing you a little bit more of the topography of the area and how the building sits within it. And again, that's a more detailed drawing of the proposed garage structure to the front of the property. This is an indicatory landscaping scheme that's been developed for the site. This shows how the scheme would include enhanced boundary features to the existing boundaries, largely retaining the existing trees on site. Where there's existing bare ground that runs down towards footpath 13 that runs across the site here, it's proposed to put new tree planting as well as defensible shrub, native shrub boundaries. This would run up back to the side of the dwelling, as well as new landscape features to the front and sides of the property. The landscape officer has reviewed these indicatory schemes and has concluded from, on the basis of the information provided, that the scheme could provide a significant enhancement on the current site layout in terms of the landscape character of the area. This shows a section into the site, again just showing the basement wall there with the stone finish, and then defensive planting that would start integrating the building into the environment, as well as acting as a security feature from the adjacent footways and footpaths. And again, just a section that shows where there are elements of boundary wall, how that would appear next to the finished surface. That site again just shows the general layout and indicates the existing informal parking area. There aren't any plans to change the existing informal parking area, that is to remain as it is. And this is a plan from the outline woodland strategy. I will come on to this in a little moment. I will just explain some other elements of the scheme first off for you. So in terms of a little bit of history, this scheme has been to 3 separate design review panels. Design review panels are independent, multidisciplinary and impartial panels from a range of related professions. In effect, they provide comments on schemes to enhance them and to provide an independent review. The last of these comments was provided in 2019 as part of this application process. The application actually came in 2017 and has been ongoing for some time. The last comments were received as part of the application. These comments effectively have identified the scheme as being consolidated through the design process and has now evolved into a scheme for an object building that, in the words of the design review panel, would effectively appear as a roundhouse within the woods. To conclude what the panel's full comments said, they recommended that, subject to securing the truly integrated environmental approach I'll touch on in a minute, as well as consideration of the peripheral elements and matters of landscaping, the scheme has the potential to meet the requirements of paragraph 79 of the NPPF. And just to reiterate, paragraph 79 is that the design is of exceptional quality, is truly outstanding or innovative and reflecting the highest standards in architecture. To set that in context of the NPPF, paragraph 129 identifies that local authorities must have regard to the comments of design review panels. And paragraph 131 relating to design says that great weight must be given to outstanding and innovative designs. Moving through to the integrated environmental strategy. The scheme proposes an enhanced building envelope. So that is in terms of its thermal massing and its construction. It is proposed to use recycled materials within its construction that have high thermal massing and are also transferable in terms of usable on schemes that aren't overly expensive and can be used on other schemes in the area. It's also proposed that the scheme would meet passive house standards in terms of air tightness and that mechanical ventilation, heat recovery systems, triple glazing and similar such features such as automatic blinds would regulate the property's building regulation values and would provide an enhancement upon standard building regs requirements. It's looking at a 55% enhancement upon building regs requirements when you consider the environmental strategy and the photovoltaics that are currently proposed. So in terms of those renewable energy matters, the scheme does propose the photovoltaic arrays that you saw earlier on the roof plans, as well as storage batteries so that the power can be released when required, along with solar evacuated tubes. The scheme also proposes the use of ground source heat pumps and thermal stores that would power underfloor heating within the building. In terms of surface water management, the scheme uses green roofs as seen, and also rainwater harvesting tanks, which would be fed from the green roofs and feed internal appropriate water sources such as water for the toilet systems, as well as garden watering matters. Any overflow would go to a rainwater garden that would be included in the detailed landscaping scheme. A further and most intrinsic element of the scheme is the biomass boiler that would power the scheme when required. This is proposed to link to the land and link to the woodland that the applicant also owns adjacent to the site. The woodland management plan that has been submitted shows how the woodland can be enhanced in terms of its biodiversity value, but it also allows and considers for the management of the woodland in terms of mild coppicing and how fallen trees are dealt with. The outcome of this is that wood that has fallen is stored and seasoned on site and can then be used in the biomass boiler to power the proposed dwelling. This link between the building and the woodland is an intrinsic part of this environmental strategy, and a unilateral undertaking has been offered by the applicant to ensure that the woodland and the dwelling site could not be subdivided in the future and would remain as one. As such, the scheme effectively promises to combine the latest environmental technologies and strategies from multiple sectors, heating, power, water, building structure, automated technologies, with the highest standards in architecture, whilst also showing an intrinsic link to the management of its surrounding land. It's this multifaceted and integrated environmental approach which provides the scheme with the ability, in officer's opinion, to meet and exceed the stringent requirements of paragraph 79E of the NPPF. To conclude, it is officer's opinion that by meeting and exceeding the design innovation and landscaping requirements of paragraph 79E, along with other material benefits, including biodiversity gains and environmental enhancements, as set out in more detail in the report, the scheme before you could demonstrate very special circumstances that would outweigh the identified harm to the greenbelt. The scheme is before you tonight with a recommendation to grant planning permission subject to the unilateral undertaking.
Right, thank you, Mr. Sharman. It is a very big report, and it's a big complex application that's been going on since 2017. So here we are now tonight to find out all about it and come to a decision. Now we have one speaker on this item, and this is Mr. Coots, Richard Coots, who is the applicant's agent. So Mr. Coots, if you're with us, I think you are.
Give me a second.
Yes,
Wonderful.
good evening. Thank you for your patience if you've been here all evening. We've had a big agenda tonight, so I hope it's not been too late. But anyway, if you were here, you would have seen you have up to 5 minutes to talk to the committee, and then if you're still speaking with 30 seconds to spare, we'll just give you a little warning. Okay, so as soon as you're ready, you can address it.
So just one moment. Is it possible that I can just share a screen, because we've submitted some images which would be useful to show this evening? Is it possible to enable that for me?
Yes, I think we can do that. If technically we can. Can we do that? Who's waiting? Mr. Pegram.
Yeah, Chairman, sorry, strictly speaking, we do have a rule that if there's any images or information that applicants or objectors wish to display or provide to councillors, we do need to have that by noon on the day before committee. So it's entirely up to you, Chairman. It would potentially be departing from that established procedure that we've brought in.
Yes, I think that's very helpful. I think, Mr. Coots, I think bearing that in mind, and also other applications we've had in the past, I think we may not be able to do that. So if that's all right with you.
That's no problem. Okay, so just to introduce you, I'm the director of Backer Architects. So who is this eco home for? Well, the applicant, Mr. Phoenix, is a main contractor that lives in the local area. As a local builder, this prototype building will provide both an eco home to train his workforce in new technologies that will raise both architectural design standards and environmental standards locally. And I did note that during the course of the evening that environmental design hasn't really been high on the agenda, which is a little disappointing. Now, interestingly, we actually started this application in 2013 with a local authority. It's undergone 3 independent design review panels, and the design review panel observed that this site could sustain a paragraph 79 house of the highest calibre that would make a welcomed addition to the area. The council and the design review panel both agreed that the building shouldn't be hidden, but provide selective glimpses if it is to inspire. Now, the proposed site is an empty former coach park used by anglers. The proposed building would occupy a portion of this site and will be nestled against the tree canopy. The replacement dwelling would act as a catalyst to reinstate and create more diversity of landscape and ecology. The site has had issues. The applicant has received a number of letters from the Environment Agency regarding antisocial behaviour and extensive fly tipping on the site. The proposed dwelling would thus be accompanied by site stewardship and would deter antisocial behaviour, maintain routes for ramblers, and enhance anglers fishing stations. All rights of ways are reserved. No mature trees are to be removed. The proposal would also provide a net ecological gain. It will showcase rainwater harvesting, attenuation, and sustainable urban drainage. The landscape visual impact assessment shows that the building nestled against the tree edges would have no significant impact on the landscape character. The access road would be tidied and potholes filled. Representing the highest standards of architecture, this is the next test in paragraph 79. Now, if you go onto Google and you type in eco home and beautiful, sadly, the buildings are quite pragmatic and engineering led. Our work and our practice is different. We propose that environmental design should be beautiful and your house should be an enjoyable place to live. Now, our approach is gathering international and national acclaim with recent commissions for government buildings in Australia and in America. People want to be eco, but they also want to live, work, and play in beautiful buildings. The pandemic has compounded this need and call for change. Our building is derived from first principles. Its setting works and responds to the sun path. Paragraph 79 demands a unique and original design. Our building is local. The round plan is intrinsic in all cultures. Our ancestors worked with the sun, but in modern times we have stopped working with nature. The design creates enclosure and protection whilst flooding the interior with daylight. It has a high thermal performance base. This heat sink regulates the building. It is now dressed in local stone, which responds to the concerns from previous parish councillors. The building has an extensive eco, renewable and water management features. The case officer has kindly outlined these. In summary, it can work off grid. Individually, some of these components are familiar, some are new. But what is interesting is how this broad variety of technologies and often competing requirements are brought together to create a home fit for the 21st century. All of these technologies by our contractor developer are transferable to domestic architecture. The materials, we have a biosolar roof, good for solar energy and rainwater attenuation, and the exterior, like the arts and crafts movement, takes its cues from its local environment. In this case, our intricate Core 10 design is crafted by local automotive industry. The colours have been worked with carefully with our case officer to work through the seasons. A building by its very nature creates debate and raises standards. Paragraph 131 of the NPPF creates great weight should be given to proposals that promote high levels of sustainability. After 7 years of development, the proposal and the officer is content that the design not meets one, but both very high levels of compliance with paragraph 79.
That's time.
We have created a beautiful building which will create an eco legacy, and we hope that you will endorse the officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you for your time.
Right, thank you, Mr. Coots. Right, just a few seconds over 5 minutes, but I'm sure we're okay with that. Thank you for addressing us. There's, as I say, there's no other speakers, guest speakers on this. So we've heard from Mr. Coots the background. It's actually been in consideration since 2013, not 2017, and he was explaining to us about the eco credentials, the architectural design principles, and also the fact it's been to 3 independent design panels, and explained to us the background before that. So it's designed to be very ecological and very, very distinctive, but at the same time fully sympathetic to the surroundings. And it's, as we've seen from the photographs and the drawings, it's a very unique and original design. And also is looking to the future with regards to working off grid, so to speak. So do you want to add anything, Mr. Sharman, or I think there's no particular queries there as such, are there? So, so I think we'll go into, we'll open it up for discussion. So I can see hands flying up already. And the first one I can see is Councillor Goland, please.
Thank you. So I think our primary concern here is building in the green belt. We've accepted a lot of building in the green belt in Rushcliffe, and we understand we need to do that to provide housing for people in this area who need to buy houses for their families. This is an area of the green belt which lots of people enjoy using, going out to walking along the river, along the footpaths we've heard so much about. So is this building able to break the rules, not break the rules, meet the requirements to break our rules about protecting our green belts? So first of all, the environmental standards. Oh, I promise you, I'm extremely keen on passive house design. I'm very keen on passive house design. I think the house would be environmentally more friendly if it wasn't at the end of a country lane. You know, fine, it might be absolutely neutral in its own standing, but there's a lot of concrete going into that building, and it's a long way from any main services. The people there are going to have to drive. So if they were really interested in really being environmentally friendly, might it be better located? The agent mentioned the fact we haven't mentioned anything about environmental standards of properties all night, and I think probably everybody on this committee is extremely upset about that. But as we understand it, we can't enforce it. Can we guarantee that this will be enforced? What promises do we have that what they say today will happen? Because as I understand it, we can't actually force that on any developers who bring normal housing estates to us. As for architecture and excellence, I mean, frankly, that's in the eye of the beholder. You know, with all respect, it looks to me like it's rusty tin, right? And I appreciate it. You know, it's beautiful and it's got won awards, but maybe it's lovely inside, but the rest of the people are going to see the outside. So does this really, you know, matter to the people of Rushcliffe what this building looks like in the middle of the footpaths on the side of the River Trent? So that's it. That's what I've got to say. I'm not happy about this.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Goland. I think we got your strength of feeling there. Probably no need to come back on any of those at this stage. Mr. Sharman, do you want to just pick up on any of those? I suspect.
Yeah, I suppose just to try and briefly address those. The location, obviously, the location is where it is in terms of providing the opportunity for this site. So yes, it isn't a sustainable location in terms of policy free and the spatial strategy. So that does form part of the consideration of this application in terms of its compliance and whether it's acceptable or not. And it's something to be in the balance in terms of whether there are very special circumstances or not. In terms of enforcing the environmental strategy, you will note the conditions on the application. There are some fairly extensive conditions requiring the full building regs drawings, which relate to all the commitments within their environmental strategy, as well as a condition requiring them to submit information showing that they would be complied with and had been installed appropriately. So there are appropriate conditions to ensure that they would commit to the strategy that they have outlined as very special circumstances. I think that's the two main things to respond to there. Clearly, design is has an element of subjectivity to it as well.
Yes, and as Councillor Goland said, people will perceive design in different ways. I mean, that's life, isn't it? So, and everyone's individual. Now, I've got two more hands up. I've got Councillor Clark was next on the list, and then Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted a query first before I'll then go on to make some other comments. The application number relates to 2017, and I noticed the ward councillors always refer to the former ward councillor, Councillor Lawrence, but we saw drawings that was presented to us with an application number of 20/02623/full, which is obviously an application from last year. So given the fact that Councillor Lawrence ceased to be a councillor on the Borough Council 2 years ago, has the current ward councillor not been consulted in any shape or form?
Yes, Mr. Sharman, that's an interesting question, because we have only got the comments from the previous ward councillor. So what happened with regards to the current one?
Yeah, so there was a revised consultation in 2019 with a set of revised plans. So Councillor Sims was consulted on the application and didn't provide any formal comments at that stage.
Okay, thank you. So that answers that question, Councillor Clark.
Right. Okay. Right. Thank you, Chairman. I'm frankly astounded because this is in the green belt, and this committee has always upheld the green belt. And in the last year, there have been 2 applications, and the on page 117, the paragraphs that are shown that refer to the green belt, none of them actually support this application. And the 2 applications that I can recall, one was completely enclosed, yet that was claimed to be openness of the green belt. Another one was an infill and claimed to be openness of the green belt. And yet here we have a property which is completely in open countryside and completely in the green belt. I'm well aware that the applicant does construct some fabulous properties around the borough. There's no issue there. They're outstanding design and wonderful properties, and really jaw-dropping and eye-watering. But my issue purely is solely on the basis that are we going to be consistent on the green belt or not? As far as I'm concerned, I don't think the purported exceptional circumstances do outweigh paragraphs 142 and paragraphs 143, where this report actually says it is considered that the proposed development would have an inverse impact on the openness and the permanence of the green belt. And paragraph 143, the NPPF states that substantial weight should be given to any harm to the green belt. So as far as I'm concerned, just on that basis alone, I can't support this application.
Okay, well, that's why we're here, of course, because I think it's fair to say that we do take the green belt very seriously, as we've seen in other applications. But there are various paragraphs in the National Planning Policy Framework and in our own local plans and policies that when we get applications like this, we do have to consider. And again, as we were saying about the design a few moments ago, some people will like it, some people won't. That's life. And we tonight have got to weigh up whether the application does meet the exceptions that are listed in the policy, in the National Planning Policy Framework and other policies, which some people may think it does, some people won't, and that's life, and that's what we will be deciding shortly. But one of the sort of comments or clauses in the framework is all to do with exceptional design and all the rest of it, which the applicant is saying, yes, as far as the applicant is concerned, he considers it does meet those requirements. And again, some people will think it does, some people won't, and that's what we're here to do. I think that's probably the correct answer to that, unless I've missed anything on there, Mr. Sharman or Mr. Pegram.
Chairman, I was waving my finger around to say more or less exactly what you just said.
Oh, right. Okay.
This application does raise some extremely complex planning issues. The site is in the open countryside. It is in the green belt.
Yes.
In normal circumstances, we would be saying it's inappropriate development, and unless there are very special circumstances, it should be refused. Councillor Gowland raised a point, was when she said, "Are we breaking our rules?" Chairman, you would not be breaking, the crux of this really is, and you are arbiters on this, the crux of this is, does this proposal satisfy the criteria of paragraph 79E, i.e. outstanding unique design and innovation? It's not just your officer's view. This proposal has been through 3 review panels. They have considered it to be potential, has the potential to satisfy that requirement. Clearly, you are the decision makers tonight, and you have to apply those same tests. Yes, you must give substantial weight to any harm to the greenbelt, and you must be satisfied that very special circumstances exist to outweigh that harm. The report is probably the longest on the agenda for us. Emphasises the complexity of this and matters that you must take into account as decision makers. But it's over to you, really, Chairman and members.
Absolutely, and indeed, it does say in the report that it considered that the proposed development would have an adverse impact on the openness and firmness of the greenbelt. It does say that, but then one of the reasons why the report is so big is because it's showing the counter arguments as well. And again, we've got to weigh those up. Now, quite a few hands have gone up. In the order I saw them flash up, I saw Councillor Mason, then Stockwood, then Thomas. So, Councillor Mason, please.
Thank you. Yeah, it is exceptional. But if somebody was to build another house like this, is it still exceptional, or another one? And if you had, say, 3 in that area, how far do you carry something being exceptional? And yes, maybe one might be, you know, okay. I'm not entirely happy with it. I like modern buildings, but it's not quite my cup of tea. But I do accept that, yes, it is very green. It is very, very good, the environment. But when we say something is exceptional, it means it's outstanding, perhaps different. If somebody else was to come along and further along the path there and say, I'm going to build an exceptional house, perhaps it might be the same. How far do you go in allowing incursions into the green belt that are exceptional in the same area? And I'm just not happy with this one at all. And I like innovation, but I don't think that's the right place, and I don't think it's the right house. So no, I cannot support it. Thank you.
Okay, but that's your, I mean, that's your opinion. Everyone's has their opinion, and that's. But the only thing I would say though is as we always say on situations like this, you can't speculate as to what might or might not come along as a future application, and who knows? I mean, and rather like we're dealing with this application, albeit it is a big and very complex one. We just have to consider what's before us at the moment. And I know you've heard me say that before, but that is the situation in the world of planning. Whether it's an application like this, or whether it's someone building an extension on a house in an estate somewhere. But you understand that. You know that.
I do understand that. But if I could just say, how far do you go along saying something is exceptional if it becomes more of the norm? And my view is exceptional is quite a difficult word and understanding on something in the greenbelt. And does that affect my view of the greenbelt? And actually, yeah, it does. I don't think this is that exceptional. It's a wonderful building, but it may not be exceptional. Okay, thank you.
No, that's very clear. That's fine. Thank you. Councillor Stockwood was next on my list here, and then Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I've been muted. Sorry. My main problem with this is, like others, it's in the greenbelt. Building in this spot would be building up problems for the future as copycats try to get plots nearby, because precedent's been set. And I know we'll judge each one on its merits, but if this gets passed, it opens up what is a very nice, beautiful area. It's a large plot with woodland and may be acquired actually to sell on when built. The rough guesstimate in the area is that it's actually going to be in the region of £2 million and for this whole plot. with the woodland and everything. And speaking personally, if I had 2 million, I wouldn't want to live in something that valuable, approached by a narrow lane, which is actually a bridle way, and it's more like a muddy path most of the year, which suits the people that are going fishing and everything. And the large vehicles are not going to be able to go down, such as the refuse collection. You're going to have to trek right the way up and put your bins on the main road up there. I remain convinced that there's enough woodland actually to sustain my meaningful biofuel. I know this, I understand there's the backup system of the photovoltaic things on the roof, which incidentally, anybody flying over would think a flying saucer had landed. I remain to be convinced also that it provides a view the whole year over the Trent Valley. The woodland is actually between the proposed house and the river. So it's not as others further along the Trent within the establishment of East Bridgford have built beautiful houses overlooking the Trent, and they're on view from the other side of the Trent, and they look wonderful. This is set into the ground, but it does not, it's still too visible if you're trying to build an eco house. I've been to see other designs because I'm quite interested in preserving the countryside, and some have been built right into the escarpment of the area, so that they're practically, you don't really know there's a house there. It's, in my view, though it's not visible from the highway, it remains a blot on the landscape. Personal view is, and I know many architects through my interest in our heritage in the Nottinghamshire area. Architects would always try to use Section 55, as it was always called, to get approval for their pet designs within an unspoilt landscape, but we should resist development in the Greenbelt unless they are very special circumstances, of course, that's been said. The innovative building materials, architects have made mistakes in the past. Not so many years ago, we had this vogue for having wooden cladding, which was untreated and wouldn't, you know, you didn't varnish it or anything, it would naturally age. But most of it's gone streaky black. It's horrid these days. Rustic steel is, to me, totally out of place in such a wooded setting. It looks like a zebra design on it. It's not. The private owners neglect to clear the site of frequent fly tipping, and that's a condition that we have in the borough. If it's on private land, it's up to the private owner to clear away fly tipping, and it's just been left. Indeed, the snow on those photos you've seen this evening have been hiding a multitude of sins. And there has been, as been mentioned, some vandalism already to a wooden building, so I'm told, in the area. On balance, I am minded to refuse this application, but if passed, I would hope that the conditions set by the planners can be vigorously adhered to. It's absolutely no use actually asking for a condition, that nothing can change in these conditions, but I foresee actually application after application for variation of conditions coming time and time again as this is progressed. It's the wrong place, the wrong design, and I would actually like to move that we refuse the application. As far as I'm concerned, paragraph 202 saying it needs to be reworded that special circumstances have not been provided to address the harm to the green belt. And I would ask for a seconder, please, if possible.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stockwood. You've covered a lot there, and it's all very, very, very clear. I don't think we ought to talk about values, because property values or land values and so on, I don't think comes into.
Just giving an indication, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
but we need to keep that out of our minds, because at the end of the day, we're making a decision on a building that, yes, the application is to go in the green belt, and we are making a decision tonight whether we approve or not. I know it sounds simplistic, but that's what we're doing. We can't start discussing financial matters and so on and so forth. Now, you've made a proposal there to refuse permission for the reasons that it's not displaying exceptional circumstances, I think you said, didn't you, for Greenbelt, which I'm sure officers are writing all that down. Do you have a seconder for that at this stage? Councillor Clark, I saw your hand go up first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll second that along those lines, because depending how the debate went, I was going to propose refusal, and it is the fact that the exceptional circumstances do not demonstrate circumstances that outweigh the harm to the green belt, as per, and I've lost the page now. Oh, 117. So it doesn't outweigh the adverse impact on the green belt.
Okay, thank you.
So I agree with you, Chairman, by the way. Yeah, values don't come into it, and I've no problem with the applicant. As I said, they've done outstanding properties elsewhere. That's not the issue. It's the green belt.
Okay, understood. We've got that. Right. Well, we've got a recommendation to refuse moved and seconded, but I've also got a couple of outstanding speakers who wanted to speak. It was Councillor Thomas and I think it was Councillor Thomas actually. Do you want to come in at this stage, Councillor Thomas? Because you had indicated quite a while ago. I did see your hand go up a while ago.
Yes, please. I would like to speak, and also Councillor Major is indicating as well.
Yeah. It'll be you and then Councillor Major.
Okay. Going back to Councillor Stockwood's question about, or comment about the biomass generator, I would like to know what percentage of the energy of this building is proposed to be generated by the biomass generator, because I suspect it's been put in, that part of the application has been put in to bolster up the green credentials of the application. So I would like to understand that really. As far as the green belt is concerned, as I read the information that we've got in front of us, the green belt argument, the very special circumstances, they're arguing that it's being derived from the fact that this development satisfies 79E of the NPPF, which in turn provides the very special circumstances. So I think in order to actually comment on this application, we need to look in detail at 79E, and that is in two parts. The first part is truly outstanding or innovative, reflecting the highest standards in architecture, and that is a subjective issue to a certain extent, the highest standards of architecture. And would help to raise standards of design more generally in rural areas. I don't think that has been demonstrated. The second part of 79E would significantly enhance its immediate setting and be sensitive to the defining characteristics of the local area. Now, the applicant's agent did express that. But I think that too is subjective. He was saying that the defining characteristics of the local area is woodland, and this has got a sort of woodland look to the etchings on the outside. As for it significantly enhancing its immediate setting, I personally can't agree with that, and it is a subjective issue, but I don't agree with it, and I'm more inclined towards Councillor Gowland's view of it as an enormous rusty biscuit tin, basically, visible from not only from the public footpaths all around, but from across the river. So I don't think either part of 79E, either of those two paragraphs, are satisfied. And on that basis, the argument that in turn dictates the very special circumstances in the grain belt isn't carried for me. So I will vote against.
Okay, thank you. Did you want clarification on the? Are you asking for clarification on the biomass, or are you just making the point?
No, I was actually wanting to understand what proportion of the power of the site would be generated by the biomass generator. I haven't seen that anywhere.
Do we know that, Mr. Sharman? Have we got that sort of detail?
It hasn't been defined as to what percentage. It's effectively a renewables. It's an integrated environmental strategy. It's a renewables first approach, and the biomass is effectively the backup to the power and heat supplies from the renewable sources. But there isn't a percentage figure that I can offer.
Okay, right, thank you. So, sorry, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Major.
Yeah, at the risk of being controversial, I'm quite saddened that we seem to have gone a little bit off piste, in my view, in the approach to this, in terms of speculating about what might happen in the future and the motives behind some of the design features. And for me, I think this is an incredibly innovative approach. I think it is exactly what the exceptional circumstances is all about. Like, someone has put in a huge amount of time, energy, effort, consultation, all sorts of inputs into this design. Yes, it might not be to everybody's taste, but I think, I think particularly in some of the materials that are being used, that is designed to make this building disappear into the landscape and to minimize the impact as much as possible. Yes, you could argue it doesn't necessarily need an infinity pool and all these kinds of things, but I think I think we're being a bit backward looking, and actually this is one instance when I feel quite confident that this would enhance the local area. So I think it does meet those requirements in terms of making it exceptional. I fear I will be outvoted, but in my view, I think this is one instance where the damage to the green belt is outweighed by the sensitivity of the design and the creativity and the innovativeness, and particularly with all the eco-credentials. And we say as a council, we're very pro all of that stuff. And yet here we are suggesting that it's not, they're doing it just to get it through planning. And actually, from my understanding of this design, it's fully integrated throughout the entire project. So yeah, I'm disappointed that we are where we are, but hey ho.
No, that's right. I mean, again, as I've said so many times, the whole idea of this committee is to get people's views and opinions, and not everyone's going to agree. That's and so don't feel bad about it. But I understand completely what you are saying, and these things have all got to be looked at very carefully and closely, and obviously we are doing so. Now, just before I go to Councillor Purdue-Horan, I've just spotted the time. It's 2 minutes to 10. And of course, technically we have a cut-off. We have to finish by 10, but we are allowed to extend to 10:30. So can I assume we're all happy to extend the meeting to 10:30? I just have to make this an official thing. So yes, we're all happy to do that. So let's keep keep to the rules and everything. So Councillor Purdue-Horan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't labour what I've got to say. I'm actually quite intrigued by the design. It's innovative and all of that, and I would tend to support us giving it a whirl. Except I sadly, where I depart from Councillor Major is it's in the wrong place where it is. I mean, I think it'd look great in Hickling, for example, but not where it is in the East Bridgford area. So I'm afraid, sadly, I'll be voting against it, not to be accepted.
Okay, well, we, as I say, as we've heard, we have had a proposal made to refuse permission on those reasons. which we will be, that is the new substantive motion. It will be in a few moments. Now, does anyone else wish to make any comments, or shall we go to a decision on this? Because I suspect we're getting near to a decision.
Councillor Murray was indicating earlier on, Chairman.
Was she? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Sorry, Councillor Murray.
I was going to say, can we go to the motion? It's fine. I was going to second the motion.
Okay, fine. Righty-ho. Councillor Thomas, are you going to be brief?
Yes, I was just wanting to query the reasons for refusal in the motion. I think it needs to state that we don't agree that it satisfies 79E of the NPPF, rather than just saying that it is a problem in the Greenbelt, because that was deriving from the other one. So we need to say we refuse it because it is contrary to the NPPF paragraph 79 and does not satisfy the two paragraphs of 79E.
Well, I think we got that because I've written down in my sort of speed writing here, special circumstances not provided or not approved, and likewise exceptional circumstances don't, and the motion says the application doesn't outweigh adverse impact on Greenbelt. I'd already got that written down. Mr. Sharman or Mr. Pegram, have you got all those points that were made, Mr. Pegram?
Chairman, yes, Councillor Thomas has done my job for me to a certain because although and again, Councillor Stockwood, who moved the motion, clearly needs to be satisfied with what Councillor Thomas is suggesting. But I noted down, and Councillor Stockwood moved it, that very special circumstances hadn't been demonstrated, and I just wanted clarification of why they hadn't been demonstrated.
So, Councillor Stockwood, could you just clarify?
Yes, and actually, I think Councillor Thomas has made my reply easy. Both parts of 79E NPPF have not been satisfied on both,
Just for clarity, Chairman,
really elaborate on that.
It hasn't demonstrated that the special circumstances outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt.
Does that make it clearer, Mr. Pegram?
Sorry, Chairman, I was trying to jot down some things and listen at the same time. Not very good at multitasking.
No, I know, I understand.
I understand the point that Councillor Stockwood and Councillor Clark are making, that very special circumstances haven't been demonstrated. But if we're going to, well, we don't know what the outcome is yet, but if we were to go into an appeal, we need as officers to understand why those circumstances haven't been demonstrated, so that we know how to frame our defence to the case.
Yes, we do need to be. You do need to be clear on that, because at the end of the day, it will be the, if assuming that permission is not granted, that will be the policy or the decision of the council. So it's a decision of this committee, but it becomes the decision of the council, and someone from the council will have to know why the committee has come to that decision. So just need a bit more clarification. Can you help, Councillor Clark?
Well, quite simply, Chairman, and I agree, we should be including paragraph 79E being quoted in our reasons. But as far as I'm concerned, whilst, yes, it is innovative and it is an outstanding design, the outstanding design and innovation does not outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt, in my view. I don't see what the problem is with that.
I think that's quite clear. Have you got that, Mr. Pegram?
I think what I'm hearing, Chairman, is that although it is innovative and of good design, it's not of a high enough standard. Am I picking up to outweigh that? What you've got to, right, Chairman, rewind a bit. we've said already, greenbelt, you have to give greenbelt substantial weight. Any harm to the greenbelt has to be given substantial weight. If you can imagine this, Chairman, you've got a set of scales and you've got the harm to the greenbelt on one side of those scales, and then you've got the very special circumstances on the other side. So effectively, those very special circumstances are given substantial weight as well, but they've got to be so substantial and so important that they tip balance so that they outweigh the harm to the greenbelt. So Councillor Clark is saying that he accepts it's innovative and it's of outstanding design, but he still doesn't think the harm to the greenbelt is outweighed. So it's just that clarification I need in terms of, you know, you're accepting it's innovative and outstanding design, but are you saying it still doesn't satisfy paragraph 79E?
Well, I think he is. I think Councillor Stopwood and Clark are saying that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fine. That's fine. It's just I was a little bit confused when Councillor Clark said it was innovative and outstanding design. So I just want that clarification. That's all.
Well, you can't say it's not. Of course it is. But what I'm saying is the level of outstanding design and innovation is not sufficient to outweigh the harm to the greenbelt.
Okay, I think we've got that now. I think we're clear. Okay.
Outstanding is a very subjective as well.
Indeed, yes.
It can be poorly or outstanding. You know.
But again, one person's idea of appalling can be another person's idea of being absolutely fantastic.
Precisely, which is a difficulty when you're deciding this type of application. I realise that it has actually caused enormous problems to many architects as they've gone through 4 years, and we've been told even more years previous to that, to try and get something on this site. Well, basically, to me, fundamentally, the site is wrong. It's in the greenbelt. It's in an area that's untouched, actually, except for recreation. So it's going to take away some of that.
And again, I think that's covered in the point that the outstanding design doesn't outweigh the negative impact on the greenbelt.
I don't want to delay things, and I want to, stress
Good.
how hard.
I think we've got.
I think we've got everything clear.
Yes, I think we have. So I think we need to move on. Mr. Pegram, are you happy we've got everything in regards to that? Thank you. So I think we have had a lot of discussion on this. I knew this was going to be a complicated application because for all the reasons we've heard tonight, and I'm not going to go over them all. But we've had an alternative recommendation put in, which is not as in the report. I think, Mrs. Sells, shall we go to decision on this? This is now the substantive decision that we've got to make. So if you would like to go to the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the motion is to overturn officer recommendation. Alphabetical as always. Councillor Butler.
No, I don't agree. I object.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Gowland.
For.
Councillor Healy.
For.
Councillor Major.
Against.
Councillor Mason.
For.
Councillor Murray.
For.
Councillor Purdue-Horan.
For.
Councillor Stockwood.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
And Councillor Verdi.
For.
That's 9 for, 2 against. So the motion carries.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So that means that the permission is not granted. Right, well, thank you. Well, I think we had a robust debate on that. No one could say we didn't discuss it in depth, and thank you for your contributions. And I know it's been a long evening this evening, so thank you. We have one more application to discuss tonight, and this is land west of Pasture Lane, Sutton Bonington. And Mr. Hilton, I think you're doing this for us, aren't you?
Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, just I'm conscious of the time. We can't start an item if we're not likely to finish it.
Yes, and what time is it? It's 10
It's 10 past 10.
10 past 10. 20 minutes.
We have 2 public speakers as well, Chair.
Yes, we have, haven't we? Yeah. I'm very reluctant about this, but I think we're going to have to be pragmatic on this. But I'm very conscious of the fact that people have probably been sitting all night waiting to talk to this. But again, as the rules say, we absolutely have to cut off by 10:30 for legal and all sorts of reasons.
What happened to these exceptional circumstances, Chairman?
We don't have exceptional circumstances for length of meetings. I really am loath to do this, but I think we probably haven't got any choice that we will have to defer this. Do I have your general acceptance of that? And yeah, I think it's 10 past 10 now. We've got less than 20 minutes to do this. 10 minutes public speak. I think we will have to defer it. I'm sorry. Unless it's all gone quiet. Everyone's gone quiet on me.
Sadly, you won't get it through in 20
No, I don't think we will. I mean, I know it's very important that the application is given proper discussion, and I would never want anyone to think that we were not giving proper consideration to an application because we're watching the clock. But because there is such a strict rule on having to close things down at 10:30, it would not be fair to the applicant if we started this and we suddenly realise we're running out of time, we've got to rush. So yeah, we will have to not discuss it tonight, and we'll have it on at the next meeting. Okay.
Yes.
So I hope I realise we did have public speakers on this. We had the applicant's agent and also the ward councillor or the standing ward councillor. So apologies to those gentlemen. We've had a busy agenda tonight. We've actually, if it's any consolation, we've got through more than I thought. I doubted that we would get through the ones we got through tonight, but we have. So with your forbearance and your patience, I think we better start drawing the meeting to a close. So it's been a busy night. Mr. Pegram.
Chairman, just to give the agent some comfort, he's listening still, I presume. This will be the first item on the next agenda.
Yes, it will, definitely. And it will be considered, like every other application, will be considered in its entirety.
I am still on the line, and I would like to thank you for that consideration. Yes, we will be pleased to speak first at the next available committee.
Right,
thank you for
that
consideration and weighing in the balance the time you had available. We do understand the import of your decision.
Well,
so we will look forward to the next committee.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your patience, and thank you for your understanding as well. It's probably been frustrating. It may have been a fascinating evening as well, but it probably be a little bit frustrating too. So with that, it will be the first item on the next meeting. I haven't got the precise date, but it'll be the March. Well, it'll be the round about the 11th of March, won't it? Or the equivalent day of today in March. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a long night. It's been a cold night. We've had robust discussions. I think we'll draw the meeting to a close. It's 13 minutes past 10, and we'll see you soon. And as we're all saying, stay safe. Be careful. Okay. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Chairman.